Fabuloso, Chris, you're still muted. You need to unmute yourself, love. Perfect.
Didn't do it the first time, sorry. My name's Chris, and I'm a recovering addict. Thanks for asking me to do this. I feel a bit out of place because and this is something I've always felt, that my illnesses sort of are not in comparison with others, but it doesn't really matter. It's obviously a very pertinent time to be talking about this at the moment, because particularly as, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people here who've got illnesses that compromise them, you know, with what's going on with COVID, etc. So it's kind of, I am supposedly a bit compromised. Now, by illness, I include, I think this is quite important, because when I came around, there was only one illness in recovery meeting in the UK, and that was pretty much exclusively for people with HIV and AIDS who were dying. At the London Lighthouse, I think it was at. And there was quite a stigma to people who had mental health problems and the use of psychiatric drugs, etc. And I always, right from the beginning, although that wasn't my story, I felt that was totally unfair, the way some people were treated. And a woman that I got very friendly with in treatment and afterwards was diagnosed with, and she hated taking the drugs and would come off of them and felt stigmatized in NA, and she hung herself. And I think we should do everything we can to make people who've got those kind of problems feel welcome and treat it as an illness, and let the doctors decide how they deal with that. Now, I did an HIV test because I was an intravenous drug user and had been for some time when I came into recovery, and it was negative. And I thought, I've escaped scot-free into recovery. I didn't, when I was using, I didn't have that much. Well, I did have ill health. I obviously had depression from continual use of opiates. I overdosed a few times. My heart stopped a couple of times. I was fortunate. In Spain, I gouged out after having a hit on a motorbike and hit the side of a bus, literally the front of it. If I'd been half a second earlier, I would have been under it. And I came away with just a dislocated shoulder and some bruises. I think I lost a tooth. I stabbed myself by mistake once, which when I went to A&E, they found difficult to believe how anybody could stab themselves by mistake. But when I was about, so I came in thinking I'd done pretty well out of this. I had a few times in being sectioned in Spain and here in England, and short periods of remand. And I thought, it's pretty good, really. And then when I can't remember exactly, maybe 4 years clean, had a girlfriend in NA who asked me to get an HIV test, which I did. And they said, no, you're clear, but you've got hepatitis C. Well, back then people didn't know much about hepatitis C. Nobody was dying of it. Nobody needed liver transplants. So I didn't really worry about it. And then it became apparent that it was a killer disease. And I managed to get on a drug trial. I think it was either 2000 or 2001. And I went on a drug called interferon and ribavirin for a year. And it was really the worst year of my life, I would say. Because unlike when I was using, where I could block how I was feeling with drugs, I couldn't with this. What saved me was a couple of things. I started at exactly the same time as a couple of very close friends in NA. So we'd be on the phone to each other almost every day. And I'd sort of ring up and say, oh, Rob, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm just lying on the sofa and I can't do anything. And he said, so am I. And we went on like that. And before I'd started, there was a guy who'd done it before me in NA and had written a book with the professor at whatever hospital it was at the time. And it was a big thing. The American programs, some of them would only give it to you if you agreed to take antidepressants. And I said, I don't know. They told me I should probably take antidepressants. And he said, well, I didn't. And the reason was I was really depressed during it, but I knew it would end. And that was a fantastic piece. And I think people outside of NA, they don't get the benefit of that kind of thing. I'm sure now it's somewhat better, but there were no support groups or anything back then. So people were doing it completely solo. Whereas in NA, we had the other people we were doing and the experience of the people who'd done it before. And that's what it's like in NA. That's what it's about. It's about other people's experiences and you pick up and you learn from that. It was a terrible, terrible year. My skin completely broke down, which has never fully recovered. I was then told a couple of years that I was diabetic, which actually is not. I just changed my diet and exercise routine and it went away. I'm not saying if I went back that I couldn't potentially come back, but and then at the end of the year when I got the first test, I'd gone back to, it wasn't negative anymore. So that was a real emotional and mental blow. And what had happened was the week I started on it, at the time I was working for myself. I had this very profitable little business, but it required quite a lot of physical and mental effort to do it. And I took the drugs for like a week and didn't feel too bad. So I booked a stand in a busy shopping mall, and I set up my stand in this show. I remember it was Ealing, the shopping mall. I think it was Ealing. No, it was somewhere near there. It wasn't Ealing, but it doesn't matter. And after I set it down, I sat down. I'd just sit down. I'm exhausted. I'll sit down for 5 minutes. So it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll go and get a cup of coffee. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was still sitting down. Hadn't got up once. So I packed it up and I but I went on living as though I was earning all this money, which was mainly in cash. But I switched careers or jobs, if you like, to something that gave me, was really enjoyable. But there's no secret, I became a journalist, a travel writer. So I went all over the world at other people's expense, which was great. But I can remember 3 months. I think this is typical of a lot of addicts I know, and they're the only people who sort of understood it. I was on a press trip to Mexico, and it was really an art press trip, and I felt a little bit out of depth because all these like art editors from national newspapers. It was about Aztecs. Anyway, we went out of Mexico City, which is at 8,000 feet, and we went to this pyramid, and they said, look, you don't have to go, the air's very thin, you don't need to go walk up the pyramid. And a Channel 4 film crew of a young girl and a cameraman of about, in their early 20s, said, I will do it, because they needed the shot from the top. So I said, I'll do it. I was sick 3 times on the way up, on interferon and ribavirin, incredible humidity and heat. And I got to the top and then spent the next 2 days in bed. And it was it's just so stupid. But when I told people in NA, they kind of understood why I felt the necessity to do it, like it was a challenge. But it was, and my health was really bad. I continued going to meetings, which I didn't want to do, and I was exhausted all the time. And I found it difficult because one of the side effects of these two drugs was you get very intolerant. And I'm intolerant anyway. So I'd go to a meeting, I'd hear somebody share, and I had to force myself to, I'd think, what's their problem? They haven't got a problem. So they missed the bus, well, whatever. You know, and I put it all out of proportion, but I did carry on going. But I think I got more out of talking to other people who were doing it. You know, the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel, is my favourite line from the basic text. So other people who are going through the same as me, it made it so much easier. Anyway, my liver was stable for many years, and then I developed cirrhosis, and it was around the time I couldn't get on a trial with these new drugs. And eventually I got accepted to do it. And then I was discovered to have cancer. And they said the priority is the cancer. I had to have a major operation, which kind of went okay. I thought 8 weeks later, I was rushed into hospital with a deep infection. And when the specialist came to see me, he came with 2 other consultants and their teams. And I knew that I was in deep trouble. Anyway, I was there for nearly 3 weeks, nearly died, but didn't. But that was a wake-up call. And then I then did the second test, the second treatment, which was much gentler, I'd say. It wasn't, and it was only, I think, for 3 months or 6 months, I can't remember. But I miscalculated it when I finished and went to Thailand. I didn't realize this until we got there to do a motorbike trip on some very challenging mountain roads. The last week I was on it. So the worst week of this treatment I decided to do, which was a big mistake in retrospect, but I did manage it. I remember doing the roads at the time, and we were just riding for miles on unbedded gravel, and I was on an urban bike, not even an off-road bike. It was quite scary, but I did do it. Which I thought, you know, I think achievements when you're ill are important, that you do something that you really want to do. And okay, it was risky. And, you know, if I got badly injured or died, it obviously wouldn't have been worth it, but I did do it. But after those 2 things, I started getting very depressed. And I hadn't, you know, when you have a sort of major life-changing surgery or illness, you don't necessarily realize what your mental health, what is doing to you. I believe, I had a sponsor, had meetings, but I think I should have gone in to had some therapy, which I didn't. And suffered the consequences, got very, very depressed, almost suicidal. I never took any medication, which probably on reflection, well, my GP thought she should have made more of an effort to get me to take antidepressants, but I didn't, and I sort of came out of it. And then I had these episodes of pneumonia over, it's got to be the best part of 2 years, and they couldn't find, they thought it might be connected with the infection I'd got. They didn't really know. Eventually they found out I was resistant to the virus that I had was resistant to the antibiotics. And just to bring this up to date, I went to Thailand, and I'll finish on this. I went to Thailand in February to have a memorial service for a very good friend of mine. And I stayed on to do some work and I started feeling really ill and getting depressed. And eventually I got the Thai tourist board to fly me back early. And very shortly, just before lockdown, I had another pneumonia. It clearly didn't completely, and they now think I might have had COVID, but they're not sure. Because I had another bout a month later. And what happened was I was staying with my sister in Oxford. My other sister, who I've been so close to my whole life, is disabled. She'd been in a care home. We'd taken her out. She wanted to come out because of the risk of COVID. And in a 24-hour period, I had come back from hospital. They hadn't kept me in for this pneumonia. My little sister, who I was staying with, had a stroke. And the next day, my other sister, the one I'm really close to, died. She was the most wonderful person in the world. But tragedy happens to many of us, to most people. We lose. As we get older, we lose people. So it's really important for me to stay involved through service and going to meetings. And most importantly for me is talking to fellow addicts and kind of making light of our various problems. And many of us have them, everything from physical problems to whatever it may be, loss. But you just got to put it in perspective. And I'm still here. I'm 67. I rode across America on a motorbike last year by myself, you know, with got all these things. They all sound bad, but I still managed to do it. So on that bright note, I followed in the footsteps of Easy Rider because I feel that I'm really Peter Fonda. I'd like to. If you're younger, you won't know who he is, but you can stream the movie. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. That was
okay. Thank you very much. So, my name's Eve, and I'm an addict. So, hi everyone. I'm going to talk about my experience of mental health, but this would just be my experience. But before that, I just want to mention, you know, before I came into recovery 6 years ago, if you had told me that I would be in a good place with a partner that I care about and with a son that just turned 1 today, I would have never have believed you. But saying that, 6 years ago, if you had told me that I would have a journey through addiction as well as mental health, again, I would have never believed you. So my mental health journey started when I came out of rehab. I came out of rehab 2014, and I just got my head around being an addict. You know, hi, my name's Eve, I'm an addict. And then I was diagnosed with bipolar, depression, and emotionally unstable personality disorder. And when they gave me that diagnosis, the first thing I thought was, again, this is another label. This is just another label to keep me down. I've just about got my head around being an addict. Now you're going to try and tell me that I'm dual diagnosis, and what does this mean? I was very skeptical about what the doctors were saying to me. And then they told me that I need to take medication. And one of the first things I thought is, no, I'm not taking any medication. That medication is going to make me zombified. I even went as far as ask my mum, and bless her, she's so old school Nigerian. So, you know, I'll tell you what my mom's response was. This mental health is not mental health, is laziness. So, you know, bless her. she doesn't, I've grown up with a culture where there is nothing like mental health. You don't take pills for your head. If you look fine, you're well. If you don't get up and you don't go to work, then you don't eat. That's how my mum's been brought up. So for a long time, I toyed with taking my medication, not taking my medication. And during this time, I was working with people with mental health and learning disabilities. And there was a few times I was called into the office by my manager, and my manager had said to me, listen, so-and-so who you worked with said that you were doing A, B, and C. And what was going on there that I wasn't aware of is I was having episodes at work. And the episodes were really that bad, that my colleagues had to go and tell my manager. And I wasn't aware of this. And I was like, no, they're lying. How could they say things like this? And, so taking medication for mental health wasn't something that I initially wanted to do. And what I've realized now is I asked all the wrong people, i.e. my mum, and I didn't go and find solace in people that had mental health. And I say this because for me, I talk to quite a lot of people that are in the fellowship that are just coming to terms with a diagnosis of mental health. And if I had had someone like that to help me, maybe my journey of mental health and recovery would have been a bit smoother. But nevertheless, I went through what I went through, and the experiences that I have got, I can now pass on to other people, which is amazing. So taking medication. So one of the first things that I noticed whilst I come out of treatment is I was still living at home at my mum's house, and I used to wake up with these really, really, really bad night terrors. And I do talk about this. I used to wake up with night terrors. I mean, me screaming and shouting to the point where my mum or my younger brother would burst in the room and be like, "Are you okay?" And I didn't have a clue what was going on. And so it must have not been easy for them to have witnessed me going through that. So anyway, my journey with mental health, and there'll be times, I never ever, and I really say this, and I mean it, when I was in my early stages of my diagnosis, and drugs have come out my system, my emotional pattern was everywhere. I felt so trapped. I felt like I didn't have anybody to talk to. I felt that what I was going through, I was going to be like that forever. I could not for the life of me see a way out. I just thought that my life would be like this, and like this meant sleeping for days, not washing, just about going to the toilet, no self-care, not reaching out, isolating myself to the max. And that was going over and over and over and over. And I really did think to myself, and you know what? And again, this is something that I say, which, at that time in my life when I was going through stuff, and I was ashamed of, having mental health, and I was taking all these pills, that these pills were making me funny. I said to myself, I made one promise to myself, and that promise was, if nothing changes for the next 3 years, at this point I was about 18 months, just coming up to 2 years in my recovery. I said to myself, if nothing changes in 3 years, I'm going to commit myself. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to kill myself. Because the reality is I had tried that. I had tried that previously before, and my life was so mundane. I made that promise to myself thinking that I would never get out of that mindset. And 3 years ago was last year, which made me 5 years. And that's also made me pregnant with my first son. So thank God I didn't decide to take my life. And thank God I stayed and waited till my miracle happened, and more miracles after that would surely happen. Yeah, so mental health for me means looking after my careers as well as my mental health. There's some days I still have where I can't get out of bed. And what I've learned is to look after myself. 6 years, I have tried and tested so many ways of trying to deal with my mental health my way. So, I've learned that, taking care of myself with a feather, showing myself some love. If there's days that I don't feel like I can get out of bed, then I won't. I'll just acknowledge how I'm feeling and just be in that moment, knowing that when tomorrow comes, it won't be as worse as today. And when I feel like that and when I think like that, the day for me goes a little bit easier, and I'm not so much cruel or nasty to myself, whereas before I really was. For me, I can never say I won't use again, but for me, when my head goes, it won't. It's not about going to pick up a first drug or a drink. It's not about that for me. It's a little voice in my head just saying small stuff like, Eve, why don't you jump? I'll be in the train station. Just jump, 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 jump. That's how my head will attack me. It will be so small, but it will carry on, and it will carry on, and it will carry on. So what I know is, when I've had 1 or 2 bad days, I will then try to reach out to someone and let someone know. My partner knows everything about me, everything about my mental health. And that was one thing that when I first got with him, I was really worried about telling him, like, how do you tell someone that, the person that you're going out with has got mental health? And the thing is with maybe stigma around mental health is when someone looks well and they dress nice and their hair's nice, people can't see that mental disability. They can't see that disability. So when you're trying to talk to someone about what mental health is, especially the older generation, in my experience, i.e. my mum, they don't understand. We can see disabilities for the deaf or the blind or someone in a wheelchair, but when it comes to mental health, I believe the stigma is so because people can't see it. And what I used to do was, when people used to ask me how I was, I would say, yeah, I'm good. And really and truly, as I'm saying, I'm good, like in my heart and in my mind, it's just screaming out, like just screaming. So I'm imagining myself in like a closed box screaming for help. But on the outside, I'm saying to everyone, yeah, I'm fine, I'm cool. And, I'll go home then and I'll close my door. And then that's when it's only me and my mental health. But luckily today I have a partner that also is with me to help me with my mental health. So, there's times when, I say hello and then I come home and then the real challenge for me starts when my door closes, when no one sees what I'm really like when I'm at home. When there's times when I feel less than. There's times when I feel I'm not the same as somebody because of my mental health. But my experience has shown me that I'm just as worthy and just the same as anyone else who hasn't had mental health. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that, addicts they got an easy time because they only got to deal with one illness. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that for me, my illness, my mental health, and my addiction, I just have to look after it that little bit more, because if I don't, my head can really turn and take me to dark places. And dark places where I've been is, I took an overdose, and I took it overdose in this house, and I remember the night before when I took it, how much I wanted to die, how much I hated life, and how much I wanted not to be in pain anymore. And looking back now, I see how I feel sorry for that Eve, that Evelyn then, for there to be no other way of taking the pain away except for ending it. So when I think about stuff like that, I then think about how grateful I am, especially, days like this when, I've had my son for 365 days today. And I feel, thank you, 5 minutes. I feel truly, truly blessed. And I knew I was going to get emotional, but I feel truly blessed that, I've got my own small place with my partner just out of shot, and my son over there. We went to see, my partner's family today. We spent a beautiful afternoon with them in the garden, and then tomorrow I'm going to see my family. So all what I've just explained to you now in terms of, today and tomorrow, I really thank God that I'm still here. And, my sponsor said something to me, which I always remember is, my God, my higher power didn't pull me out of a drowning river to leave me dead on the wayside. And even now when I say it, I get goose pimples. So, I'm today, I know for a fact I'm one of the lucky ones. And as long as I acknowledge, my mental health, take my medication when I'm meant to, and it could be small things, like if I know I'm going to stay over at my mum's for a night, I would maybe pack two days worth of medication just in case. It's small things like that have helped me in good stead to look after my mental health. And as long as I keep on looking after my mental health, and I keep on doing all the things that are suggested to me, I know all will be well. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
You there, Freddie?
You need to unmute her, Vicky.
I can't see
Can
Freddie.
you unmute Freddie?
I'm trying to unmute it.
You're done.
Yes.
You're there.
Hello,
Yeah.
sorry, I was asked to mute and then unmute and mute, but I'm here. Anyway, lovely. Thank you for asking me. My name's Freddie and I'm an addict.
Hi, Freddie.
And welcome to the Illness and Recovery Convention. Got to kick off this. I don't know quite where to start. I am today 7 years, 10 months, and some number of days clean, and 14 days clean, as my app has just told me. And my life has greatly improved, and strangely enough, so has my health. I've lived with physical disability since I was born. What you see of me is not the most painful part of that disability. I've lived with kidney issues, pain in various sort of places in the lower back, issues with my feet and my legs, and of course the disease of addiction. Way, how much fun is that? And what when I've before I came into recovery, I had 2 kidney transplants. I saw my dad nearly die in front of me, having donated his kidney. He was in the resus room, being surrounded by people, alarms going off. They were all rushing with the tinfoil sheets to try and keep him alive. And all I had to do was calm down and let the anaesthetist knock me out and pray that the kidney took. Thankfully, my dad did survive it, and so did I, obviously, because I'm here. But after 3 years, that sadly failed, and I had to have another transplant. That didn't stop me using. That was in 2002, November 2002. And I was still using. I used for another 10 years after that. And one of the things, I never realized the importance of self-care around my health. I kind of thought, got a new kidney, doesn't matter, it'll be fine. And I never really, there were times when I'd forget to take my medications, not very often, to be honest. I remember one time being completely off my face, a couple of my friends having to carry me back from the pub and let me into my flat, what have you, lifted me up, threw me on the bed and said, right, that's it, and we'll see you tomorrow. And I went, no, I got to take my kidney medication. So, even when I was off my tits, I knew that I had to do something. And so I always, most of the time I took the pills. Before the first transplant, I was on kidney dialysis for a number of months to prepare my body for the first transplant because of my using. Those were the times when I kind of would forget my medications. And I kept drinking. So I thought, well, I'm going on dialysis, whatever, it'll clean my blood, it'll be fine. So I never really appreciated the gift I'd been given, not only the first gift, being alive and having parents who loved me enough and put everything they emotionally, physically, and financially could into giving me as normal a life as possible as a disabled child. But I always was a bit of a stubborn, so-and-so. I've never had the give up button in me. Funnily enough, since recovery, I sometimes get the give up button pop up and wave its ugly head, and I hover and I hover and I hover and I go, no, I've come this far, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit quitting drugs and living a better life for myself. Because I've developed a kind of, I suppose it's like I've developed a self-worth that has given me, it's given me more of a knowledge of what it actually entails to live with an illness in recovery. It's and they speak about get up, show up no matter what. Well, that's what I have to do. I have to take my medications. Otherwise the kidney rejects and I'm dead. I'm diabetic, type 2 diabetic. It was induced from the steroids that I had to take when I had the transplants. And for a long time, didn't give a stuff about what I ate. Sometimes wouldn't take the medication, not because I was being stubborn, just because I was off my face and forgot. I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not that important. It's not saving my life. And so it's sort of, what's ended up happening is that I do the simple things. I've got a vat of water here with a bit of mint in it to make it taste nice. It also helps my breath as well. But it's something that I never really considered. I'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll just go to the pub and have a blackcurrant and soda. At least I'm not drinking. But that blackcurrant and soda would contain, like, God knows how much sugar. So I wasn't considering that. So, the way I live my life now is completely different. My life is very peaceful, very harmonious. Majority of the time, life happens and, people do what they're going to do and behave how they're going to. But, I keep it simple and I keep using the program. And the longer I'm in, the more I'm able to see the consequences, I think, of my behavior and how that can affect me at the end of the day. You know, I used to get in cars with people who'd be driving up one-way streets, and you know, I mean, I used to snort cocaine off someone's key ring whilst I was driving. You know, I didn't give them monkeys. You know, getting in cars with random people and going off here and going off there, and you know, I'm surprised I never got arrested. But I suppose one of the things that I have lost during my recovery is an arrogance of I'm disabled, I'm untouchable. You know, I take responsibility for my actions towards other people. I take responsibility for my actions towards myself. You know, I look after myself to the best of my ability. You know, I've started dating again after the end of a long-term relationship a couple of years ago, and I find it now a lot easier to discuss those kind of things. You know, how I lead my life. You know, I don't sort of hide in shame that I've, you know, that, you know, I used to do this and I used to do that, because that's kind of like who I was. It's really refreshing for me to be able to sort of say, yeah, I've got this, I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other. But do you know what? I love my life. Rather than I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other. Oh, well, fuck it. Oh, sorry. Do you know what I mean? And it's just a lesson in life. You know, recovery has given me, you know, I either had the arrogance, I either had, and occasionally still can, you know, I'm human, no one's perfect, but, you know, I used to have a huge arrogance around me and felt like I was untouchable and all the rest of it. And one of the hardest things about doing that is the self-denial. You know, I mean, I did things when I was younger and inactive that you know, I'm not particularly proud of, but, you know, I strongly believe that sort of coming into recovery, well, I didn't really have a choice when I did, but coming into recovery has, it's helped me to realize that I'm bloody lucky to still be alive. You know, a 14-year-old girl was on a life support machine, pretty much brain dead. And on the 24th of November, 2002, they made a decision to those parents turn off their daughter's life support machine and donate her organs. And thanks to that, a useless ex-junkie at the time, called Freddie, received a donation of a kidney that saved her life. And she didn't give a shit. That didn't even stop me, you know? Didn't stop me doing these things. You know, the ability to actually hold myself accountable for my own health. You know, I always used to sort of, oh, can somebody help me? Can somebody help me? You know, oh, what am I going to do? My mum died. Oh my God, I can't possibly look after myself. You know, oh God, my dad lives in Spain. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh no, poor me, poor me. It was either egocentric or poor little victim, you know. And I'm proud to say I stand on my own 2 feet today, you know. I have choices. A couple of years ago, I had some major surgery. Due to my kidney issues, and at birth, my bladder wasn't formed properly. And I have something called a urostomy. Basically, I pee into a Tesco's bag. Not literally, but I've got like it's like an operation where the urethra is brought out onto the skin and I pee into a bag, which is technically my bladder. And fuck, I can't believe I just said that in a meeting. But anyway, you know, I've got nothing to hide with me, you know. And I had to have major surgery to have that reconstructed because I was at the risk of dying and losing a kidney 3 years ago. And it was one of the scariest experiences in my life because I was clean. And I was, I felt truly on my own. I was in a relationship. He was physically there when he could be, but I felt so alone. and I shut down. I convinced the hospital to let me out after 6 days. Yeah, me, I'm on the verge of passing out, and I'm standing up going, look, I can walk, I'm fine, I can go now. I got in a taxi with my little grey NHS bag, and I went to a meeting. Because when I came round, my ex-boyfriend told me, I said, oh, is it morphine? He went, no, fentanyl. I absolutely shit myself, and I said, I want me to take me off that as soon as possible. Which then resulted in 3 months of hell of going in and out of hospital. Things that I never want to have to go through again. And having been through a lot in my, I've always had health issues, I've always had needles, you know, funny enough, I was never an IV user. But I was so terrified of using again that I came off the pain medication too quick. I've never been in so much pain. And trust me, when you live with the things they've done to my body over the years, pain levels don't even touch it. You know, I'm literally, you know, I'm 6 days after like a over 7 hour operation. I'm fine to go home, and I'm walking to my scooter and driving out the building. You know what I mean? I'm one stubborn asshole when I want to be. And it taught me something. I lay there in that bed and I cried in that hospital, and my ex-boyfriend was asleep on my shoulder. And there was this girl, she was to be about 16, chatting away on her phone. She had her mum there. And I cried and I cried and I cried, because when I had all that, I didn't appreciate it. When I had my first transplant, one of my friends came to see me and said, come on, let's take you outside. Stuck me in a wheelchair, put the drip up, all the rest of it. Took me to the fucking pub, and I had a Jack Daniels and Coke. Fresh after having a kidney off my dad. And I sat there in pain because I didn't want the fentanyl. And my heart broke, and I realised, I've got to fix up. I've got to fix up. I've got to fix up. I can't live in my past anymore. And somehow I got through it. It certainly wasn't because of my ex, God bless him. Did the best he could. You know, I was, I think, about 5 years clean. So, yeah, 4.5, 5 years clean. And, you know, over 7, nearly 8 years, God willing, I will make that. I am responsible for myself and nobody else, whether I'm in a relationship or not, whether I'm at my dad's in Spain or not. I hold responsibility for every choice, action, and second thought and action of that thought that I choose to take. And that is something that recovery has helped me to see. And I was always that person who always really, I felt like I needed to have somebody in my life to be there for me, not to be there with me, to be there for me, because I was so terrified of being on my own. Oh, cute little doggy. You know, and at the end of the day, it's, you know, I have so much more choice now, because I really pulled my finger out of my backside, and I realized that I can do a lot of this on my own. And when I say that, I don't mean to be dismissive of NA, because I can do the things I do on my own because of the connection I have with people in the rooms, because I speak my truth. I don't lie to myself anymore. I do meetings. I do service when the cameras aren't on, you know. I don't talk about the things that I do. I just do them. Do the step work. I'm back on my second step 4, and I know it will be far more different from the first one I ever did. Because for me, that period of that operation was one of the scariest moments in my life, because all the people I'd relied on in the past weren't there. because they were getting on with their lives or dead. And I'm really glad it happened, because it really, it gave me the ability to not only look at the sort of the stuff, thank you, acknowledged. It not only gave me the ability to take responsibility for my actions and how I treated my body, how I treated my disability, and how I treated my illness. It also gave me a respect for other people for getting on with their stuff. Everybody, as far as I'm concerned, should come into recovery to live their best life. And if that best life doesn't mean being there for me in my hours of need, I need to be there for me. I need to know that when I'm in that pain, I need to pick up the phone and I need to call my sponsor. I need to pick up the phone and call my friends. And that is what my recovery has taught me. I'll always have my physical disability. I could lose my kidney at any point. My HbA1c, which is your general blood sugar measure, could go up. But I put one foot in front of the other to stop that from happening. Because ultimately, I don't want to die today. And whether or not my latest date, leads to anything, I have boundaries in place because I don't need someone in my life. I would like to share my life with somebody. And I think that's enabled me to be the person I am, and to not sort of need people in my life, but to want people in my life. I have a very small group of really close people in my circle, and that includes recovery and out there in the wild world. Very small, and that's how I like it. I feel like I've just gone I, but you know what? My experience is that life can be really shit, but I got to put my big girl pants on and get on with it. I have to take responsibility for myself. I have to keep working this program. My strength is that I am honest and I'm willing to learn new things, and I'm open-minded to suggestions. My hope is that I live a long and healthy, in my eyes, healthy life. That my hope is that somebody has heard something, identified, felt something from what I've shared, but never, ever give up, no matter what. Had I given up those couple of years ago, I wouldn't be here sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And thank you so much for asking me to be of service today. God bless, and take care. Thank you.
I'll give you the 5 minutes after 15. All yours.
Okay. My name is Hugo S. Karin, I'm 44 years old. Anyway, let me get my book of notes. I made a lot of notes for what I've been through. I'm not too old, but memory starts to failing, which is sometimes can be really awkward. First note, thank you, Yanni, for coming up with this idea, and anyone who seconded, for doing this event. It's been a pleasure, and I have no words. Been doing service with all of you. I can't connect with Zoom. It's been really hard to do meetings lately, and this one, what we've been doing. Come on, I don't want to see myself. It's been amazing, And yeah, thank you, Yanni, not just for this. Thank you, Yanni, for being my pal, for being my friend, for being there in my worst moments. Hopefully, I'll have the time to let you know why. Yanni came and picked me up at my darkest moments, took me to a meeting, Yanni came, picked me up, and told me, let's open a meeting. And we opened the meeting. You know, I was at my darkest moments. All I could think about was, how can I heal myself without suffering or making others suffering? And I came to NA in 1996. I was 20 years old. Today I'm 44, as I said before, which means that I've been more than half of my life in NA. You know, it's all I know is NA. All my friends are NA. You know, early 90s. In one of my, but that I didn't know what the hospital was. Well, I knew what the hospital was because, you know, oh, I have a fever. Oh, let's go to A&E. Oh, I'm not feeling well. Let's go to A&E. That's all I knew about hospitals until I came to recovery, or until I came into the rooms. In the 90s, around my neighborhood, everyone was dying. It was like, oh, that guy has AIDS. Where's that guy? He passed away. You know, everyone was being decimated with HIV and AIDS. And I was the lucky one. I came to the rooms. I was a good-looking guy, 20 years old. My son was a couple of months. Can't remember. It was between April and June that I came in 1996. That I came to the rooms. And I was I was the guy that used to look, you know, from above everyone else. I was better than on the outside, but I was worse than everyone else on the inside. You know, I was the counselor. I was the psychiatrist. You know, I was the guy that if you take medication, you're not in recovery. Da da da. And in 1997, after going through a very funny process of being raped by a guy in the rooms that came and offered me help, and I woke up in the middle of the night with him. I don't want to be very specific, but woke up with him, and then the following morning I wake up and I was like, was this a nightmare from the medication I took? The first thing the guy told me, that you had as much pleasure as I did, and that was really, I don't even know how to explain. I wanted to kill him, but I didn't have the courage. Moving on, I was clean for 2 months. I had a relapse. Some people call it a slip. It was just one day. It was just one use up. I had a relapse. And 4 days into that relapse, I received my blood tests, and I was HIV. I am HIV positive, and I had hepatitis C. I was starting to say this in early 90s. I was diagnosed with hepatitis B, and I thought that was an upgrade on my addiction. You know, I was the coolest. You know, now I can say I have hepatitis B from my using. I thought it was really cool having hepatitis B. With 15 years old, I was arrested as an adult. Spent the night in a cell with another 20 other guys that I didn't know. When we left, we went straight into the neighborhood to buy drugs. I felt I was going to be robbed halfway through, so I left halfway through and I went to my neighborhood. So yeah, 1997, March 1997, I'm diagnosed with HIV and hepatitis B. And I went straight to a meeting, and I'm sitting. This guy picked me up. He was supposed to come on time to come with me to the appointment. He came late. It's very typical. It's a very Portuguese thing, getting late to everything. He came late. When he arrived, I was sitting in front of the institution that gave me the results. And I was like, I blame you for everything. you know. He took me to a meeting, to a lunchtime meeting, and it was one of those meetings that goes around, you know, after the first person starts sharing, it goes clockwise. So I was sitting, the person that started sharing was the person that was sitting right on my left. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to share. Everyone shared, I shared in a meeting. It was the first time that I was not the bad boy that I thought I was. And I started crying in the meeting because I thought I was going to be part of all those guys that I knew that passed away from AIDS. You know, I was like, oh, where's Hugo over there? He has AIDS. Oh, he's gone. You know, and when I finished share, while I was crying, the guy that started sharing, that was sitting on my left, he whispered in my ear and said, welcome to my world. And I looked to my left and I said, I wouldn't say that, you know, I'm looking at you. So yeah, there was this guy that was, I used to look, I don't know, I used to look at him as a god, you know. He used to have these shares of stopping in the middle of the traffic, assaulting people because they cut him off in the traffic. And I used to look at this guy's, I don't know, this guy's my idol, you know. And I asked him to sponsor me, and he sponsored me, and he started helping me. He was one of those guys that used to brag about, I have AIDS, and I've been in hospital for long times because of this, and he knew his ways around the hospitals, and he took me to book my first appointment. And I went to my first appointment, and after the first appointment, blood tests, blood CD4 counts, viral loads, blah blah blah. Come back within a month, and I went back and started using again for another month. And when I went to my first appointment after those blood tests, I thought that would be a good idea to be honest with my doctor. You know, I thought that the doctor knew the DNA language. I thought that I could say that, oh, this is just for today, I cannot guarantee tomorrow. And she turned to me and said that, I don't care. The medication is really expensive. And if you take the medication, I cannot guarantee, but I can give you up to 10 years of life. Without the medication, you know, it's a matter of time. And the thing that stayed in my head was like, I only have 10 years of life. I'm 21 years old. I left the hospital and I went to a meeting. And I don't know if other people are like me or not, but I like to distribute my pain to see whether medication is best, you know. And this guy came to me and said to me that, listen, instead of spreading around your problems waiting for the best answer, I just want to tell you this. You come to NA, you have a higher power, but the higher power for your disease is your doctor. So listen to him. Listen to your doctor. I really didn't like to hear that, you know. The following week, and I went back and I said, promise I won't use again, you know. And she gave me the medication, and it started with, if I'm not mistaken, 4 tablets a day. Then it was increased to 8 tablets. I think I went to, it was almost 20 tablets a day. And it came to a point where I was taking the medication, and the more the doctor would tell me to, you need to drink at least 2 liters of water a day, and I would go like a camel, like no water for days, you know, absolutely no liquids for days. The more the doctor would tell me to drink more water, the less water I would drink. I ended up as a consequence of that, and the consequence of the medication, obviously. I ended up in hospital, pissing blood, because the medication was creating crystals in my kidneys that would make kidney stones, blah, blah, blah. And the worst parts of going to the hospital with all these problems was the second time that I went to the hospital, and my mom came with me, and I was in so much pain that I've decided to lay down on the floor. Now the floor was made of stone, and I've decided to lay down on the floor, and I can only remember my mother's words: "Come on, shame on you. Come on, that doesn't look well. Just sit down like a proper person." Now I'm in pain, I'm in the hospital, and I'm supposed to behave. You know, but anyway, it was my mom. You know, it was my mom. So I didn't have the courage to after 44 years, I feel like I'm still afraid of my mom. Anyway, on that day was another day that I was afraid to tell her that I am sick, you know. And yeah, let me see my notes to see if I forgot something up to this stage. Well, with this, apart from this came something called lipodystrophy, you know, which is if I start putting some weight, my legs won't change, you know, my fat will not be distributed equally through my body. I will get boobs, I will get belly, and that's it. My fat doesn't go anywhere else because of the lipodystrophy, you know. And I'm lucky enough it didn't came to my face, where my face will look like a skeleton with skin, you know. That you know. And one of the things that my doctor used to say was like, "You're a very active man. Your hepatitis C is controlled. There's medication for that, but it's really painful." She never explained how painful or why, and she always refused to give me the medication. She used to tell me that, "Oh, it might interfere with your HIV." In 2006, I came to this country, and one of the person that today is my wife took me to the hospital as my friend. And the first thing they did was they removed the medication that I was taking, the one that was making me kidney colics, and they said that we don't give this medication to anyone anymore because of the side effects. Now start taking other medication. The medication started working. My viral load became undetectable. It was already undetectable. I had a peak when I changed medication, and it became undetectable again. And they start talking about the treatment for hepatitis C. I went to specialists, hepatitis C, interferon. I've never said no to anything. I'm very brave. Let's go. The doctor asked me how's my schedule, how's my work, and when I said it, he said, "No, I can't give it to you." Carry on going until he said, "Oh, there's medication coming out, but it's not compatible with your HIV medication." And I waited until he finally gave me the interferon treatment, and it was the worst 9 months of my life. That's all I can say. Like someone mentioned before, I've started listening to every doctor, every counselor, every psychiatrist, you know, in the rooms and outside the rooms, the ones that don't have an office, the ones that don't have a diploma. I've started listening to people that did in this case, it was my wife's friends. if you take the antidepressants that they're trying that they are suggesting you'll be using, and I went, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 months completely berserk, giving my injection every week and taking the ribavirin every day. I was, let's go to the supermarket. Yeah, let's go to the supermarket. By the time I was ready, I was afraid to leave the house. By the time I was outside the house, I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. And I would create an argument and I would go back and I wouldn't go. Something that I had pleasure before. And I've decided to start taking the antidepressants. On the 4th week of taking 5 minutes already, acknowledge. On the 4th week, after being told that I had less than 10% chance because of my virus, on the 4th week, I received a call saying that my viral load for my hepatitis C was undetectable, which was a good sign. On the 9th month, it was completely gone. It was undetectable. And they said that, oh, we can carry on to 1 year, or we can stop here, but it might bounce back. And I said, I don't care if it bounces back. I'm going to stop it. And I was taking antidepressants, and I stopped the antidepressants as well. Cold turkey. And 1 year later, I was back on the psychiatrist because I was depressed. I wanted to kill myself. I was waiting for trains, and I'm going to jump. What happened if I jump? I would make movies with everyone around my coffin. I would close myself inside the toilet for hours. In my head was just minutes, thinking how to kill myself and how long will it take for them to find me dead in the toilet. I've seen the psychiatrist. I've took medication that never worked, but they insisted I should take it. The more medication I was taking, the more suicidal I was. I was diagnosed bipolar. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with cyclothymia. I was diagnosed bipolar again, recurrent depression, chronic depression, and then bipolar again. And every time I was seeing the psychiatrist, I was receiving a new diagnosis. And one day I've said, enough, you're not helping me. I need someone to listen to me. The medication is not working. The medication is not helping. I need someone to help me. I need help. And they gave me a new diagnosis. You have anger issues. And and I went home and I've stopped it cold turkey again. With this depression, I put on 40 kilos. I went from a person that between 80 and 90 kilos to 120 kilos. I had problems in my back. I had to take painkillers for my hip because I was too heavy. I went to the pain clinic. They prescribed me some medication. I went home. I opened the leaflet and says, if you had a problem with drugs, don't take this medication. I was like, I've said them that I'm an addict. And they gave me this medication, put it on the side. As a consequence of that as well, because of constipation caused by the medication, I had a surgery to my colon because I had piles. I spent 6 weeks taking painkillers, you know. I remember, again, Yanni came to my house to visit me because I had the surgery. And all of a sudden, he just told me that, listen, you have to take your painkillers. Don't do that to yourself. I was in so much pain that I couldn't even sit. I was walking around the house because I was in pain. And yeah, I don't know how to finish this. I like someone said that I didn't have the most pleasant 23 years of recovery. I can tell you that it's worth it. I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't take the medication, if I wouldn't go through this, you know. One thing I wrote on my notes is, it's a very common phrase in NA, you know. It's the most negative thing that someone like me can hear, which is, if you have nothing positive to say, say nothing at all. Come on. I'm sorry. We don't deserve to hear this. I'm not like this by choice. I'm listening to a share and it's like, yes, I have the perfect share to share back, and then all of the sudden everything goes tits up, and then I don't know what you shared, and I'm trying to remember things, and nothing comes out as eloquent as I thought in the beginning, you know. I became agoraphobic, you know. I'm afraid to leave the house. If I leave the house, I need to have a point A, point B, you know. If there's something in between, I'll have a panic attack. I have no idea what to do. I'll start stressing up. You know, I want to punch people in the middle of the street. I start hyperventilating in the middle of the street. I'm now doing trauma therapy with someone that called me in the middle of the lockdown, saying that my psychiatrist was out if I wanted to be followed by this therapist, and I said yes. It's been very helpful, because the fortnight hasn't been very sympathetic with me, you know. One thing is, I am afraid to leave the house, but I am alone. The other thing is, I'm in the house and I feel arrested, you know. I am afraid to leave it because I'll jeopardize other people. I don't know how to explain this very well, but I hope you understand it. Anyway, I was given 10 years of life. He goes in 23, you know, as someone said that I'll let me enjoy as best as I can the time I have left, you know. It might be too much, it might be too little. Another hiccup I have is like the problems of my wife. I had my gallbladder removed. I end up back in the hospital 1 week later in pain because apparently they severed one of the nerves that goes, I don't know how to explain that, but I couldn't breathe. The breathing was not from the lungs, was from the nerve. Every time I was breathing, the lung was being touched or something like that, and I couldn't breathe properly. I ended up crying, embarrassed in the waiting room, so much pain that I was. They gave me morphine. They wanted to send me home because I refused the painkillers. If apparently in the hospital, if you refuse the painkillers, you are okay. So they tried to send me home, and my wife made a big argument in the hospital, and I ended up staying 1 week. Anyway, my time is up, and it might not sound like I'm really, really grateful to NA. I cannot connect with people as easy as other people, you know. I am afraid to give myself, and when I give myself, I give too much. That's my feeling, you know. Some people might think, well, this is me thinking what other people think of me. Might think that I am arrogant, you know. I'm always happy to help people. Sometimes more than they deserve, but I won't stop doing, even if they don't deserve. You know, I won't stop helping people because I was helped one day, and I'm still being helped. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Hugo. That was really wow.
Hello.
Hi, Jim. Hello. I'm going to hand it over to you. I'll give you the 5 minutes at 15 minutes. Okay, love. Right.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jim. I'm an addict. Hello. Firstly, I need to say that I've had a stroke. If I sound as if I'm, completely off my tits, as somebody just said, I'm not. That's a stroke. Secondly, I'd like to thank the people who set this up, especially Vicky and Jim, and made me so welcome and sorted me out. And that's it. Nobody's spoken about it, but I'd like to ask the people who produced the In Times of Illness book, you know, which came out in, I think, 1992. You know, our predecessors, thank you for doing that. Bless them for for doing that. I'll be eternally grateful. So experience, well, in 1958, my parents sent me away to an English boarding school, and I was very, very badly abused. So I got angry. I got really, really angry, and at the time I was having piano lessons, and in a room next to mine, I discovered all these uh, drums, you know, timpanis and bass drums and snare drums and bells and cymbals and everything, you know. So I started hitting things, right? And I got really good at it, you know. And so on. In 1964, I did my very first drumming gig. I've been a drummer and percussionist all my life. And in 1968, I went down to London in a rock and roll band. And I don't really need to talk about drugs. You know, after that, you know, 1968 in London, bang, you know, and so from there, but even by, you know, kind of the age of 14, you know, I was smoking weed, I was drinking, you know, I was taking these little things called black bombers and purple hearts and stuff, you know. So I was well on my way there, you know, and I was in the music business. And to cut a long story short, bang, 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 bang. But then, of course, it bit me on the rear end, you know, because I got really kind of I had to play music that I hated because I had a massive drugs bill, you know, and then I finally got to Narcotics Anonymous. In what I call my hokey cokey period, in that I was in 1 minute and out the next, and in 1 minute and out the next. But I finally got the kind of gift of desperation, I guess, in the end, and I got a sponsor, and I take my clean time from the, and I hope this is right because I think he's here, he's checking on me. From the 1st of April 1997, when I sat down and really started the program, you know, on step one. So I take it from there. And the next 10 years of my life was beyond my wildest dreams. You know, I fell in love with a beautiful woman who taught me just about everything I know about relationships, you know, boundaries, and you know, I was able to be taught, you know, which is a great gift. You know, my sponsor got me straight into service. H&I was working in a clean wing of a prison. I went back to college, and I was playing great music. I made 4 CDs in that time, one of which I got a charity award down in number 10. I got a charity award in number 10. And then I got cancer. I got prostate cancer, and you know, you can't say no to cancer, you know. And I had a large operation. They removed my prostate gland, and then they didn't think they got it all at once, and at the time, I think well, no, most of my using was kind of Jack Daniels, you know, methadone and cocaine. I'd never had sweet sister morphine before, you know. And one of the mistakes I made before I got introduced to illness and recovery was, well, they gave me shed loads of this stuff, and it was, you know, to be honest, it was quite pleasant. You know, they gave me shed loads of this, and while I was on it, I thought that I could do what I was doing before I had the operation, you know, and that's a big mistake. But then a friend of mine set up an illness and recovery meeting in Greater Manchester, which I used to go to weekly, bless her. I could never understand why there was so few people there, but that was just incredibly useful. You know, the booklet, the 12 suggestions, you know, being honest with doctors and medical people, and being, you know, talking to my sponsor and all this kind of thing before I kind of made mistakes, if you understand me. So I got, as I said, the cancer had moved. I can't say that long word. It had moved, and after into one of my testicles, and I had to have that removed. And then, meanwhile, I'm having massive hormone injections, and excuse me, I'd forgotten that I ballooned up in weight because I'd forgotten that you know, thwacking 7 bells out of a drunk at 4 or 5 nights a week was keeping me fit, you know. So I just ballooned up, you know, from about 12, 13 stone to about 20 stone, which is where I am now. Then I had to have my other testicle removed. And so then they stopped all the hormone therapy because I'm now producing my own female hormone. I can't think of the name of that. I'm sorry about the stroke. Occasionally it's like those old tellies, and I've got to bang the side, you know. But yeah, I'm producing my own female hormones now, and by then I had 2 more operations in my colon, and by the way, if somebody says they need colonoscopy, run. Just run, you know. Very uncomfortable, and unfortunately, I had got slipped some discs and stuff in the 80s, but under anesthetic, you know, they kind of move, they kind of ride you around, you know. So that got really bad and painful. But in my last operation, what the problem was, there was scraping nodules from my colon, and they nicked the sciatic nerve on this side. So I've now got, in fact, the last time my doctor came to see me, he said, well, your problem, Jim, is catch-22. And I've said, can you run that past me again? Catch-22 is a ball in a film, I thought. And he said, well, yeah, your problem is when you put the weight on that side, you know, that hurts. When you put the weight on that side, that's not, you know, catch-22. So that's where I am at the moment. Several beautiful Narcotics Anonymous friends, and the friends and fellowship that I've had of this, I've put myself in a wheelchair. I couldn't get down to the illness and recovery meeting anymore. Some friends of mine used to put me in a wheelchair, but I'm badly incontinent now. And I'm sitting there in a nappy is kind of not pleasant anyway. So I'm now at home, and I'm you know, hitting my sponsor, and I found the online meetings, the Highlands and Islands online meetings, and I was able to start an illness and recovery meeting about 5 years ago. So now I'm in sheltered housing. Excuse me. In sheltered housing. But I go to meetings. I've been going to, you know, 4 or 5 meetings a week now for about 5 years. And my home group is the Illness and Recovery meeting, which I chair on a Thursday here online. So that's fantastic, you know. And it's been an enormous help to me, especially in times of illness. The 12 suggestions, you know, is absolutely brilliant. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat as well. And so yes, I'm in pain a lot of the time, but I tend to be able to kind of distract myself from it. I think that the beauty of the illness and recovery meetings is that you can talk about anything, you know, medication, about etc. But it's the consequences of illness, I think, that are so. I mean, I had to let the woman that I love go. She was younger than me, and she wanted children, and my libido just had gone. And also, I can't play the drums like I used to be able to do. And believe you me, I was quite fond of both of those things, you know. And so that's, I think, is a kind of loss with people. And the beauty about the online illness and recovery meetings is, I think, that I can go there and talk about it, you know. And we have a fantastic little meeting there with some wonderful people. I don't talk a lot these days, and I think that's maybe what's wrong with my voice at the moment. So all I'm going to say really, these days, all I do is well, keep it simple, go to as many meetings as I possibly can. And I swear by the just for today reading, you know. Every morning I say, you know, tell yourself, Jim, you know, tell yourself, get a program, try and do it to the best of your ability, if you possibly can. And also perspective, I think, and gratitude is, I believe, a grateful addict, you know, is a clean addict. A perspective, you know, shelter, food, warmth, and this wonderful fellowship, because the help I've had from people in Narcotics Anonymous is just beyond parallel, you know, the help. And also, try not to be afraid. You know, if I follow the the way the ways of people that I talk to and share with and ring up and all that, you know, I've got nothing to fear. You know, so onwards and upwards. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. Getting emotional now. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karin. I'm an addict, and I'm from California, so I talk funny. Nice to be here. Thanks for asking me. My clean date is August 25th, 1976. I just turned 44. I am closer to 66 than 65 years old. And when I got clean in North Hollywood, California, where the mythology or the story is that they say that's where NA began, when we actually know it began a number of places, but it was sort of, the structure was formalized there. So when I got clean 44 years ago, people did not come to Narcotics Anonymous with chronic illness because most people were young. And it was easy to walk around saying, don't take nothing no matter what. And you could be very glib about that and casual because nobody needed to take nothing. And we were never expecting to grow old. Nobody was looking at Hep C. Certainly no one ever thought they'd live long enough to have certain other cancers or conditions. And if something was hurting you on your body, you were just a whiner and you weren't grateful. It was a very severe time. So I had a birth defect. I still have it, and it is a birth defect of the spine. My mother took DES when she was pregnant with me. A lot of this I didn't find out. So some of my inner workings aren't quite the way they're supposed to be. So I've been in posture class since I was little, and my first sort of confrontation with this in recovery, because I really don't want to focus on what my people call kvetching. I don't want to sit here and tell you everything I have. It's just pointless, okay? So my first sort of confrontation in recovery with this, I had about a year clean, and the pain that I was experiencing in my neck and my head, it was just incomprehensible. And I just remember lying there saying to the person I was involved with at the time, I have to take something. This is not optional. I will lose my mind. I will have to kill myself if I have to feel this one more minute. And so he said he was going to go out and get Tylenol, which I thought was like the stupidest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And I lay there and I was praying and I was praying. And I really did not believe in any kind of higher power at all for my first year and a half. So this was before I even believed. So I'm just like lying there praying. And I woke up when he came back in the house, and I was blown away that I was granted sleep in this much pain. And I have to say, I've had a number of those experiences since I've been clean, where I was in a position of just incomprehensible pain. And somehow that day passed, and then there was another day. And for me, sometimes the thought is just like, there are days that are going to be different than the one I'm having right now. And this program is 24 hours at a time. You know, who am I telling? You all know this stuff. But sometimes pain for a day is something that I can breathe through. If there's one thing I've learned about my recovery, it's that to be able to sit in my feelings and just have them and know that they won't kill me. When people go, oh my God, how do you have 44 years? You have 44 years because you don't use and you don't die. It's that simple. There's nothing special. I mean, yeah, there's complicated issues in how do you not use, and there's a lot of footwork that has to be done, but pretty much it just comes down to that. So for me, that was my priority. So I was one of the first people in my area to develop what is called fibromyalgia. And I hate the term and I hate the name. And back then it wasn't even called that, it was called fibrositis. They didn't know what it was. They just knew that some people had these nodes in their connective tissue. And I would go to this doctor who would give me massive injections in the base of my skull and down into my shoulders and up into my shoulder blades. And the process was horrific. And then I would sit up straight all night. And then about 24 hours after that process, I could turn my head again. I don't know what people thought. You know, the experience in recovery is when you have something, everyone has it more than you, and everybody knows exactly what you should do. And so I would get this, it didn't feel like compassion to me. To me, I always felt the recipient of know-it-allism and judgmentalism, which is, of course, a reflection of what I give out. And I felt like I would try and attempt to talk about the experience of what it was like to be trying to sit in a straight back chair in a meeting and have people go, oh, my back hurts too. Yeah, my back hurts too. You know, how do you explain to somebody? It turns out that I developed something called CRPS. I don't know what you guys call it in your country. It used to be called RSD. It's a sympathetic nerve ailment where the sympathetic nerves overreact, of course. So if you know, I had a little crack in my heel and it felt like my leg was getting crushed. And I was literally crawling across the parking lot of the orthopedist office, trying to get into the building because I couldn't be upright because the blood flow was so painful. And all this time in my recovery, I'm thinking that, okay, so I'm supposed to stay clean. I'm supposed to work the steps. I'm supposed to stay grateful, but I'm feeling like this. And I don't understand why, God, why I have these extra challenges. I don't get why I have this. I met a woman who chose to be in a wheelchair rather than try to negotiate her way around in pain. And I thought, well, she's just doing it for attention and she's being dramatic and all that, because I came from a very abusive childhood, and to me, pain, physical pain especially, is something you just shut up and put up, and you know, yours is no worse than anyone else, and why are you even talking about it? I mean, these horrible self-talk things that we give to ourselves, that I gave to myself in recovery, this sternness, which has nothing to do with anything spiritual. But I actually did end up spending a year in a wheelchair. When I was working, I was a high school teacher, and I finally I threw in the towel. I couldn't do one more acting as if, one more fake it, one more slogging along on my cane. I spent so many years like just humping along with the cane, you know. And that year was fabulous. I had so little pain. You know, yeah, it was hard. It was a drag, but it was so great. I didn't hurt for a whole year. And really fun things happened with students. I know this one kid just kind of went nuts this one day and grabbed my wheelchair and just started running. And it was so much fun. The wind in my face and I was screaming, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed myself. You know, part of how I got in this position was this brutality. I guess that's what I'm supposed to share about here, is that I've been so brutal to myself in recovery, and so shaming and so stern, because I somehow interpret that as having really good, strong commitment. I ran 5 miles a day for 5 years in Los Angeles, where it was sometimes 105 degrees, and many, many days there were smog alerts. And I pushed myself to do this, to get my way around this track 5 miles, 5 times a day, due to eating disorder and other demands and perfectionism, just all kinds of reasons that weren't healthy. So a lot of that is the reason why I ended up in the boat I ended up with. And so ultimately, I don't know how many years I had when it was really obvious that I needed to replace a joint. So I went and got joint replacement. And that was a very embarrassing thing for me to do in recovery. Before that, I'd had a total hysterectomy with a precancerous condition, which is kind of what happens when you're a DES daughter. And it was the first like major surgery I'd had in recovery. I had maybe 20 some years clean. And I'm lying in this hospital bed, and I swear to God, you guys, the window of the room, of my hospital room, looks straight down on my sponsor's apartment. Cross my heart. So all I had to do was look down, and, you know, accountability and support and love, and what a coincidence. And, you know, yeah, it was a horrific experience. And yes, they did give me medication. That was a surgery that had complications. And it was that thing where you just feel like kind of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame in meetings, like everybody's sitting there and having their tea and coffee and yucking it up, and you come in there, you know, crawling your way into the meeting and just, oh my God, Karin, how are you? I'm great, never been better. So I don't know if you have this in England, like in America, when you get sick, it's just like a head slapper. It's, oh shit. Now I have my mortgage and I have to get medical care. How in the world is this going to happen? You know, it can ruin you. So my artificial hip failed. It was one of those, I don't know if you have this in England, where it's like, if you got this kind of a hip, you need to call this phone number. Well, that's what I got, you know, my ass got recalled, literally. So this is happening. I'd been married 26 years. My husband left me with 2 teenagers and my ass gets recalled. I have a brand new job and I'm like, I've stayed clean through everything. I've been of service. I've worked my steps. Why is this happening to me? You know, that really helpful place that you get into. And then finally it's like, okay, I'm going to learn how to ask for help, which I didn't. So this is a gross story, but I'm American, so I say gross things. This one night I'm lying in bed and it was in a house up in the forest. And the only source of heat that I had for 20 years was a wood burning stove. And I'm upstairs, right? And this is downstairs. And this is just like a week or so after the surgery. And my teenagers have split. As you can imagine, as we would have done if we were teenagers, mom is incapacitated, we're out of there, right? So it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the house is ice cold because I can't load the wood stove, right? And I'm sobbing and I get a terrible gastric issue, right? And I know that I've got to do something. So I am able to crawl to a commode, I relieve myself, I get back in bed, and I cannot get any rest because of the odor in the room. And I can't get rest. And I know that I'm never gonna get rest, and rest is the only thing that'll help. So I crawl over to the commode. This is recovery, folks. This is clean, like 20, 25 years. I'm using a commode for a walker, going, today I live. I'm grateful to the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And so I crawl across the landing. I'm just about to make it to the bathroom to clean up, and I fall. Woo! And I fall, and I'm in all of it. I am in all of it on the ground. And it takes me a couple of hours to crawl through it and to do the cleaning process. And I'm sobbing, and my teenagers have bailed, and I crawl back in bed. And you know what's so great about this nightmare story? I stayed clean through this pile of shit. And that singular sentence is something that can be used in a myriad of situations in recovery, to stay clean through the pile, you know? And sometimes there's an audience watching you do it, all right? So, so now I get to tell this story and gross people out in the UK who probably would never share a story like this, but because I'm one of these Americans, I just say these things and you can just sort of file it. You know, that thing this gross woman said. But just know that when you are on the ground in the pile, it's happened to somebody else, right? Beyond all that, I'm lying in the hospital. When that one failed, I'm in the hospital again. I'm in a nursing home for old farts. And people are bringing meetings. I don't know if you've had the experience when your health is doing whatever and they bring meetings and they come into your house and they sit down and they look down at you. You're in the bed and they're like, looking at you going, hey, are you okay? And you're just like, you're in my bedroom. This is weird. And they have this meeting around you and it's very nice and you thank them all and you're just like, oh my God, I hope they never come back. But, you know, it keeps you clean. And my grand sponsor, who I revere, brought me some sweats to wear in this hospital for when I went to physical therapy. Dude, the first day I had them, I pissed in them. How do you tell your grand sponsor you just peed in her clothes, you know? Anyway, wow, I have 5 minutes. I'm disgusting. Okay, so I hear you, I see that. So I guess what I want to say about this is I've referred people to this piece of literature a lot. Now, all joking aside, as you see, I use humor to survive. If I don't spend time in humor, I'll relapse. I won't make it through this stuff. I choose, you know, I don't have all the feeling in my right foot. It makes for very amusing escapades, but it also makes me fall down a whole lot. I am continually falling and bruising and having weird boots and having a cast and having a cane. And, you know, I have a little, one of those scooter things. And on very bad days, I have to allow myself to use the scooter, even though it's embarrassing. I just know that today is not a day that Karin can walk. It just won't even work. So that's my condition. And the thing that I love about this book is, yes, it says in here, it has advice for how not to get hooked when you've had surgery and you're, you know, whatever. I'm not someone who takes pain medication. I feel perhaps I'm not spiritually advanced enough to risk learning how to take it in a way that's careful. I could just be fear-ridden. I am not pointing the finger at anybody. It's just not something that works for me, okay? I have to find a myriad of ways of not taking anything. The latest is like I've done yoga for several years. Did I start out being any good at it? No, I started out as someone who falls rapidly. I spent more time on the ground picking myself up than being upright in any kind of position. I've done it for a couple of years. I've gotten a lot better. I've tried acupuncture, you know, whatever. I've done stretching. I've done going to the gym. I've done massage. I've done hot tubs. I've done pressure point. I've done, you know, everything close to just sticky peacock feathers in my butt and yodeling. You know, I've done everything a person can do just for relief and just for help and just to be positive. And it's just the way I need to roll. But I love this on page 34. The disease of addiction is progressive, incurable, and fatal. You know, you don't argue with that. That is a very important statement. And it says we are vulnerable to our disease even after long periods of abstinence. Right over here. With this in mind, many members have found it helpful to ask for assistance from their NA friends and sponsor in monitoring and prescribing mind-changing and mood-altering medication. So after the second hip replacement, they send me home with a blister pack of opioids, a freaking blister package of opioids, right? I had to find somebody to distribute these to me. And what I do is I take an inventory, a pill inventory every night. I haven't had to since I had that surgery, but I write down the hour, what the prescription is, what I took, the exact amount, you know, and every night at 6 p.m., call my sponsor, read the pill inventory, and do what it says. Stop a little sooner, take a little less, you know? The day I realized I was done post-surgery, I was so angry, I took my MacBook Pro and threw it against the wood stove. That's how pissed off I was because I knew I was done taking it. And I'm not one of these people who goes, I don't really experience any relief from my medication after surgery. It's just something I do. And then I thought, no, for me, what happens is relief from emotional pain, relief from anxiety happens to Karin. And I know that I can't continue taking medication. That's me. That's just me. I want to be clean. I want to feel my feelings, even if they suck, you know? And the day may come where that is no longer my choice, where I may be in a situation where I will need to be on medication daily. And if that's the lesson in this life, so be it, okay? But right now, just for today, I have what I need to sit through all this crap in my body. I walk funny. I get really angry when people walk towards me making fun of how I walk because they think I'm trying to look tough or cool. I am tough and cool, but that's not what the walk is from, you know? And it's been useful. You know, in conclusion, all of this physical crap that I go through has been so helpful to so many people who feel so unique in their situation. You know, just yesterday, my husband's back was out and he was saying, oh, I can't believe I feel this way. Oh, how do you even get around? And I'm like, yeah, every day, bucko, every day. And he's just, oh, I think I understand you better. You know, that's a win, right? When newcomers come in and they're just like, I can't do Narcotics Anonymous, I have too much pain, I can't, we have this booklet, we have people with experience, and we can share. You know, sometimes just going up to a podium in your chair or with crutches or with your splints carries a message. That's how bad we want this. That's how bad we want this. We will gimp and crawl our way. And I'm in. You know, I'm in for the long haul. I don't know how much longer my haul is. Got a lot fewer years ahead of me than I do behind me, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this thing. And I just can't believe I was asked to come here and talk about this stuff. Nobody ever wants to hear this stuff where I live, but that's my experience. I love you guys. I'm an Anglophile from way back, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Vicky, for asking me. Thanks everyone for doing service. I'm Nikki. I'm still an addict. I'll begin with when I first came into a recovery, and that was me, 42 kilos. At that time, I was 8 years on dialysis. I accumulated so many illnesses while I was on dialysis because the majority of the time I used to refuse to go hospital for my dialysis 3 days a week, 4 hours a time. I used to say I was in a coma 2 or 3 times, but the more I got my memory back, the more I recognized that it was more than that. I hammered myself. I would go to dialysis, and as soon as a nurse or a doctor tell me something I don't want to hear or look at me a wrong way, I will threaten to take the stuff off and run out. So I gave them a lot of hard time. It was really hard. Me leaving dialysis all the time, straight to home, straight to my bottle of whiskey, straight to smoking, straight to doing whatever. You know, it was hell for me. The more I was sick, the more I found out that I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to accept being sick. I didn't want to accept help. I didn't want to do anything. I went through doctors' mistakes, nurses' mistakes, and when that happened, I'd run home and lock the door. I've had police breaking down my door a good few times because the nurses will call the police because I didn't turn up for a good few sessions for dialysis. I've had ambulances constantly in my house, in my neighborhood. When you hear an ambulance, it's definitely coming to Nikki. You know, that I got used to waking up in hospital, not remembering what actually happened, which later on I found out that I was in a coma. You know, and I came into the NA not because I wanted to admit I had an alcohol problem or a drug problem. I came into NA because I needed friends, and because, yes, I was walking like a dead zombie. I had a suitcase at the door constantly because I never knew when I'm going to be an inpatient. I had sick buckets all over my house, constantly vomiting. Still, that did not stop me doing what I was doing. And by that time, no family member wanted to know me, no friend wanted to know me. My life was between hospital, off license, drug dealer, and Iceland. you know, for a long time I lived off a cup of soups because I believed if I drink a cup of soup, that means I ate for the day, you know, and that was for quite a while. And I came into my first meeting and I loved it. I wanted to, I thought, oh my God, I can start interacting with people now. I've got people that wants to hug me and interact with me. And I stayed drinking though. Drinking was not a problem in my head. I didn't want to believe that drinking was a problem. I've forgotten that I got arrested drunk and disorderly endlessly. I forgot that I couldn't remember getting home many times. I forgot smashing up my house. I forgot all that. I forgot about all of that because alcohol was not a drug in my head. And I started going, something in me kept telling me to come back. And I remember even when it's cold, even when it's raining, even when it was snowing a bit, I'd still get up and go because I made a commitment to myself that I needed to do something with my problem. And it was really hard. I couldn't walk like everyone. I did vomit a few times in the toilets of meetings, but I wouldn't show it. I wouldn't show to people. I don't know if people knew or not, but I tried to look normal. Getting up the stairs, it took me every 3-4 steps I had to rest. My energy was dead. My life was dead. It was just, you know, I was constantly waiting to die, and I was constantly praying, please God take me, you know. The first 7 months I came into recovery, I stayed drinking. A lot of people kept telling me or suggesting to me and stuff and telling me that alcohol is a drug, but no way I wanted to listen to them. And then one day after a meeting, I went to a pub and I found myself in the corner of my settee with my shoes and my jacket, you know, at the corner. And that's when I realized that alcohol was you know, I believe all those readings I was hearing finally clicked in my head, and I gave back my 7 months, 6 months hearings, and I started again. And then while that was happening, I was still not behaving properly with dialysis. I was still being mischievous. I was still not taking the medication I need. And then friends that I met on in the meetings, they started hanging around with me. And when I ended up a couple of times an inpatient, people started to come and visit me. No one used to come and visit me. No one used to even ask whether I'm alive or not, including my family. And friends really cared, you know. And then I think I relapsed another time. It was Mother's Day. I gave myself a reason. You know, I've not spoken to my mum by then for about 4 years. So I drank. And then something clicked again. You know, there shouldn't be any reason for me to pick up, because first I get really more sick than I'm already am. See, I always believed that it was dialysis and it was, you know, me not having kidneys that was making me ill. Well, it wasn't. It was how I treated myself, how I never loved myself enough, how I never ate properly, how I never used to sleep, how, you know, I just never took care of myself. I hardly ever took my medication. So the third time I went back, it was only after, I think, a couple of months or so. And then that's it. I took it more seriously than I ever did before. And again, you know, my friends in NA would come and sit with me the whole 4 hours on dialysis. And that was like, oh, wow to me. They'll drive me and they'll pick me up. And, you know, just constantly, asking me if I'm all right. I even had a person came up to me once in a meeting and asked for my details, and she wanted to know what's the procedure for donating a kidney. I've never had that. I've never had that from anyone in my family. And that was big again for me because, you know, I've got loads of family problems, but I'm the only child to my mum. And I really thought my mum once that she was going to go for the test, but she refused to even test herself. So for some stranger at a meeting, and, you know, my eyes watered and I was like, you don't have to do that. You know, and she goes, I know I don't have to, but I want to. You know, and I really didn't contact that lady again and whatever, but just the thought that she said that to me meant the world. It meant like she gave me a kidney. And the more I came into NA, the more I done meetings, the more I done service, the more it gave me my health back. It made me walk more. It made me, I was still weak. I was still, you know, fragile. But something came inside me that I became more able to do stuff instead of just sitting in one little corner feeling ill, and that's all I was. And then 3 years ago and a few months, I was going to a meeting and I was in one of those moods, fed up moods, you know, because I gave up that I'm ever going to go and see my family in Morocco because that's where I'm from. I gave up I'm ever going to have a normal life, that I'm going to die on dialysis. And they phoned me. I got a transplant 3 years and a few months ago. I got a transplant because I came into NA, because there is no way, no hope, nothing. The doctors refused to even put me in a waiting list because I was constantly damaging myself. Since then, before I got my dialysis, I had epilepsy, I had shingle, I had lupus, high blood pressure. You know, I've got weak bones. I don't know what that word is, so long and I can never remember it. And I've got all this stuff. I used to get pneumonia a lot. And when I get pneumonia, because of my immune system, they have to put me in a room on my own, and everyone has to wear gloves and stuff all around them just to come in and see me. I got the kidney and I couldn't believe I got the kidney, and then I got ill again and I was very fearful. And again, my friends, I remember being really ill, and someone asked if they can video the meeting, one of the meetings, and I can be in the meeting. And that was big for me as well. Like, everyone was thinking of me in that meeting and praying for me. You know, there was so many things, and it's all thanks to NA. My life today, it's all because of NA. You know, I've put on weight. I've been talking to my mum. She's in my life today. I had a wonderful sponsor first, and I have another wonderful my second one sponsor. She was wonderful as well. They all wonderful. They all been in my life and been like number one, because I never knew, especially women, me to be a friend with a woman. It wasn't in my life. It wasn't part of. I always hanged around with men, you know, and life is a lot easier now than it was then. I've still got health problems. I've got the diabetes. I've got this bone stuff that they still look. I've got mental health problems, but you know, it's not good for me. And I do see therapists every now and then, but I never follow it. And I know that I need to follow that stuff up. And when I know that I'm going through a hard time, what I do is I up my meetings. I call everyone. I just do, I try and do as much service as I can, you know, because a while back or before I came into NA, no one could dare tell me I was an addict because everyone was scared of me. No one could dare answer me back because everybody was scared. It was like I was like some King Kong that someone used to call me. You know, I wouldn't listen to anyone. I didn't want to hear anyone. Today, I've just recently finished my first step 10, you know, and taking my inventory, and there's a lot to learn still. You know, I'm still a baby. I am 4 years, 9 months and a bit of change. Thank you. And I still feel like I'm the baby in the family because there's still so much. I'm still so hungry to learn because without NA, I definitely would have died. I was in my last leg. I was like a dead zombie walking around with a sick bucket in my handbag, looking at the floor, constantly fainting and not showing it, constantly sweating. You know, today I sleep. I never used to sleep at all. You know, I had some sort of insomnia and a doctor, you know, they were always trying to give me more medication. I was on 36 tablets. I didn't want to take more medication. I was blaming the medication on my lack of sleep. Today, I take 8 medications. You know, there's a big difference between how much I used to take and how much I take now. You know, I go to my appointments. I speak to my doctor. A few years back, I admitted to my doctor that I was an addict. She was so happy because she couldn't tell me that I was an addict. She said she's been waiting for me to tell her, you know, and stuff like that. And very grateful, very, very grateful. Without this, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't even love myself as much as I love myself today. There's the odd days that I can't stand, you know, I want it all now and today. But when I look back, and I just done my inventory with my sponsor a few days back, I've achieved a lot. I've gained a lot. I've even gained weight. I've never thought in my whole life, you know, I'm 70 kilos now. Some people would think, oh my God, but to me, you know, my mum moans at me. She wants me to look at plastic surgeons for my chin and for my belly. And she's like, I like this, but I don't like that. And I'm like, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying what I have. Acknowledge, Vicky. And you know, I'm enjoying who I am today. You know, I do want to be healthy and all that, but I could not taste food for a long time. I could not. My taste buds were gone. And today, I taste my food. I enjoy my food. So there's a lot into it. And all I had to do is keep coming back. And there's many days I don't like going to meetings and I make myself go. There's many days I don't want to be in Zoom and I make myself go because I know this is good for me. And I leave it there. Thank you so much, everyone, for making this possible.
Penny? I know I've said this before, but I feel like I'm in a seance. Are you with us, Penny?
Penny, you need to unmute yourself.
There we are.
You're right.
And I'll give you the
Right.
5-minute signal in 15 minutes time, Pen. Welcome.
Okay. My name's Penny. I'm an addict. And it's always, I guess, an honour to be asked to speak at an NA meeting or an NA function of some sort. And I guess illness in recovery is somewhat of my forte at the moment. Well, it has been for quite some time. But before I start talking about my illness in recovery, I want to talk about something that happened before I got clean. And it was when I was in Durham jail. And I went out to have a serious abdominal operation. And I was sort of more or less clean for sort of 9 months, more or less, but not quite. But I hadn't used opiates for that time in prison. So I went in and I had this operation. And as soon as I came round, they gave me an injection of morphine. And what happened was, as soon as I'd had the injection of morphine, I was crying like a baby. And why I was crying, it's not enough. I need more. It hasn't worked. You don't understand. I need more. It doesn't work the same for me as it does for other people. And what happened was, it kind of like that, just that injection just brought out that obsession and compulsion. And yes, I'm glad that I had that experience before I actually came into the fellowship, because it's held me in good stead. So, right, so I've been clean since the 12th of April, 1988. And when I was about 5 years clean, I got diagnosed with hepatitis C. And at that time, I had a scan and I just had fibrosis. And they started me on some trial with interferon and some other drug. And after 3 months, they phoned me up one day and they said I had to stop the medication because it was actually destroying my white blood cells, which haven't absolutely completely recovered since then either. And so I stopped the treatment. And then over the next few years, you know, my fibrosis started to turn to cirrhosis. I had a further treatment of interferon with ribavirin, which was absolutely awful. It was possibly one, you know, it was just really dreadful. I was meant to take it for 14 months, but after 38 weeks, I just said to them, you know, I just can't do this anymore, because the ribavirin was just making me filled with rage all the time. And the side effects from the pains from the side effects, because I had to be on this other thing to increase my white blood cells, and that gave bone pain, and the interferon gave joint pain, and the ribavirin gave muscle pain, and then there was all the other sort of side effects as well that were, you know, it was just too much for me. And in the end I stopped, and my hair was all falling out and I just couldn't stand it. And so I stopped after 38 weeks. And I had actually, after 23 weeks, my viral load had really dropped, and I was negative for 9 weeks. But what happened was that as soon as I stopped the treatment, the virus came straight back. So I assumed that even if I had completed the treatment, it would have come back anyway. So what happened then a while later is that the cirrhosis kind of got worse, and I got diagnosed, I think, when? 2007, I think. I got diagnosed with hepatocellular carcinoma, which is primary liver cancer. Now, it's quite interesting because only 8% of people with this survive for more than 5 years. Well, I've had it for just over 12 years, so I'm gifted, I think. I've been given the gift of life for it. And so what happened that, like with this cancer, I had different treatments. I had two different types of treatments over the years for the tumours. One's been radio frequency ablation, where they put a probe in between the ribs and microwave part of the liver. They do that under a general anaesthetic. And then the other treatment I've had is transarterial chemoembolization, where they put a line into the femoral artery and feed it up into the liver, and then put a load of chemo directly into the liver. And there's beads that kind of like bind around the tumour and starve it of blood and oxygen, so it kind of like dies. Now, these were quite painful procedures, and with the chemoembolization one, they had to give me some medication so that I could have the treatment, because I had to lay still on the table whilst they did the treatment. So they gave me a very minuscule amount of my drug of choice, which was actually diamorphine heroin, and also this other tranquilizer called midazolam. But what it did what the drug is actually intended to do. Because what it did, it stopped any pain. And the sedative made me relaxed enough to be able to lay still whilst they actually did the treatment. And I've had 8 or 9 of those different treatments. And I've been in pain afterwards a little bit. And quite often they have offered me codeine and other drugs. But I've always said that I just use paracetamol because of the incident that I had when I was in Durham. The fact that just that one shot really brought back the obsession and compulsion. I've decided that when I'm not in serious pain, I will not take anything, which doesn't mean that in the future I won't take anything, because if I need to, I will, because it says in our literature, you know, that we shouldn't be a martyr to illnesses. And if we're in pain, that we should take whatever is prescribed, as long as all of the doctors are aware of our condition. So that, you know, maybe I will at some point, I don't know. So I've had these treatments, and I was put on the liver transplant list some years ago. I can't remember exactly when. I think
we lost Penny. I'm just going to contact her.
because what happened, I'd had a scan and gone straight to the airport, which is slightly irresponsible, but so I hadn't got the results. So then when I got to Thailand, they phoned me to say that they found that I had a tumour that was in the portal vein, which meant that the cancer was metastasizing. I can't say that word either. And so that it was moving outside. It was in the portal vein, which is the big vein that kind of like feeds the liver. And so I went back to England a few weeks later, and I went straight into hospital and had it treated. And they'd said that I couldn't, you know, they had to take me off the transplant list because of with having the cancer outside of the liver. What that meant was that if I was to have a transplant, that the cancer would just go straight back into the new liver. So I was no longer considered to be well enough to have the transplant. So what I heard them say to me was that I was basically going to die, and that maybe I would die tomorrow or sometime soon. Well, that was quite a few years ago, and I'm still here. And I've had other tumours, and I've had them treated since then. And I'm in the process at the moment of having some investigations done because of my tumour markers were quite high, and then they've doubled for over 3 months from March to June. And I've had 2 scans recently, and I have to go back. I had a scan yesterday, so they're going to discuss it in their team meeting, I think on Wednesday, and then call me and tell me what's going on. And I'm expecting it to be another tumour, you know, for the cancer to have returned. If it hasn't, I shall be absolutely delighted, but I'm totally prepared to go back into hospital again and to have the same treatment again. And it will be okay. You know, the only concern that I have, if it's because there's some sort of thing on the caudate lobe, which is the lobe at the back top area of the liver, which was previously quite a healthy part of my liver. So it's kind of like spreading over my liver now. And what will be, you know, and I just kind of like think, so there's something there, I'll have it treated, it's okay, you know, because I have to think that, you know, and yeah, what else can I do? I just have to accept whatever it is. But I have to say that I would be absolutely delighted to find out that there's nothing there. But the tumour markers and the anomaly on the caudate lobe is kind of like quite significant, because of the tumour markers don't go up for any reason other than a tumour. So it is what it is. And yeah, I'm very grateful. You know, I still, even though at times I'm quite unwell, I am quite active. And you know, how come I'm still here, you know, all these years later, and with this illness? I guess it's because I look after myself. I eat healthily, I exercise. I've just bought this new fancy electric trike, and I've just been out on a ride with my grandson. We went out on 2 rides, and we cycled. Mine was only half assisted, I might add, by the electric, but so only when I was going uphill as well. So yeah, we cycled 18 kilometers, you know, today, which is good. And you know, so it's about, despite having illnesses, despite, you know, feeling unwell at times, you know, and I felt depressed at times. But I just remember years ago, I was when I was in Durham, I went to see the doctor there because I wanted some medication, you know, I wanted some drugs. And he said, and I said, I'm depressed. And he said, what's wrong? You know, why are you depressed? And I said, you know, I came out with this long litany of things about why I was depressed. And he just turned around and he said, I don't think you're depressed, but I do think you've got a lot of things to be miserable about. And But then he proceeded to prescribe me loads of stuff, which is what I was there for anyway, because I wasn't depressed at all. And the thing is, if I do get serious, you know, so what I'm saying is there's been times in my recovery when I felt like shit, but I wasn't clinically depressed. I was sad. You know, when my son died, I was bereft. When my mum died, when my dad died, when both my brothers died, you know, it's a cause for sadness and grief, but not necessarily, you know, but depression is part of the recovery from that process. But I don't, for me, if I was to get clinically depressed, I would take something. But when I'm just sad and miserable and filled with grief, I don't need to. And, you know, I'm very, very grateful to this program. And I just love Narcotics Anonymous, because of Narcotics Anonymous is what's made my life possible. You know, all I have to do to maintain my lifestyle, as well as going to visit the hospital now and again and having blood tests and scans and treatments and things, is to go to meetings, to share honestly, to have a sponsor, to do service, and to do the steps. You know, that's it. It's so simple, you know, and that's why I'm still here. And that's why I'm clean for 11,825 days, I think. So, you know, because I turn up, because I've done what it's suggested, you know, and this program is really, really God-given. And I'm really, really happy to be here, you know, and I've got my grandson with me. I've just banished him to the bedroom, and I've been trying to set the TV and DVD player up in there, but I couldn't. So he's just been banished for a while. But that's one of the joys of recovery. And there's so many, many joys that I'm just so grateful to be here, and so grateful to Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm grateful for the people who did service and came into Style Prison in 1986 and 87 when I was there, because without them I wouldn't have heard about this program. And this isn't about age tonight, it's about illness, so I shall leave it there. So thank you.
Great.
I'm Simon, I'm an addict.
I'll give you the 5 minutes after 15 minutes, Simon, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, thanks. Yeah, as I say, I'm Simon, I'm an addict, but I must say that those two words for me didn't go together until I was 48. You know, I very much thought I was a party animal. And I thought and again, this word wasn't part of my vocabulary, the consequences of that, you know, the accidents, the fights, the trips to A&E, the scrapes for the law, the broken relationships. I just thought they were very much part of my life and just accepted them, got on with it. My biggest consequence was that every 15 months or so, I ended up in psychiatric hospital. I'm old enough to call it manic depression, but everybody else nowadays would call that bipolar affective. And I might stay in hospital for a month or up to 6 months, but you know, in my experience, what psychiatry does is replace one lot of psychological problems with another. I'll just briefly give you a little idea of what my using was like. My mother died when I was 13, 1973. And that Christmas was the first Christmas, so I got let loose on alcohol. Us kids were given a couple of flagons of cider, and somebody bet me I couldn't drink one down in one, which I did. And then after that, I was just skimming drinks off all the adults in the main room. And I went without Christmas dinner that year because I threw up and I was off and running. In the middle of my using, I would go to a lot of festivals. I remember waking up, having blacked out, in a sleeping bag under a minivan, somewhere besides a motorway between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. And at 30, I was looking at 7 to 14 years in prison. Fortunately, I got found not guilty. And the end of my using, life was just really, really small. It kind of revolved around the nearest pub, the nearest off license, and the garage at the base of a tower block at the end of my street. And I didn't really go much further than that. Every morning I'd start with a shot of firewater, chased down by a can of beer, and then help the caretaker's husband clean down 11 floors of a tower block. And then we just basically sit and use for the rest of the day, alcohol, cocaine, puff. And then at the end of the night, he'd send me home, say, turn the bell off, don't let anybody in. But, there'd be a guy across the balcony that I shared who'd be smoking crack, and I'd let him in and we'd carry on. And like every night I'd say, I'm not going to drink in the morning. And every morning I'd say, I'm not going to smoke crack tonight, but it never happened. So anyway, it wasn't really until I was 48, as I say, that I started to have physical health problems because of the antipsychotics that I was taking. So I started to talk to my psychiatrist about if he were to take me off the antipsychotics, I would address my drink and drug problems. So I went through the usual thing, CDAT and the local treatment agency. And I'd see my counsellor every Tuesday, and I had what I called the Friday fuck it switch. Either 3 days later or 10 days later from having seen the counsellor, I would basically think, fuck it, I've been really good, I'm going to use this weekend. Then one Tuesday, my counsellor said to me, you can't do this harm minimisation, controlled using, you're an addict, get yourself to an NA meeting, there's one in Leytonstone tonight, phone the helpline, excuse me, find out where it is and get yourself along there. So that was my first meeting, the 1st of December 2008. And it was the back of It Works, how it works, when I heard alcohol is a drug too, that was like a light bulb moment for me, because it explained all my substitution, all my trying to stay off alcohol, because I recognized by now that was my gateway drug. And yeah, so that as I say, that was like a light bulb moment for me. And like early 2009, I guess, I found myself a sponsor. I started to do my steps. I was on step 1, and looking at the pattern of my bipolar episodes and how often they would be accelerated by the drugs that I were using, and looking back, finding out how unmanageable my life was, and looking back how I'd always been told if I stay off the drugs that I was on, those I admitted to taking, that the bipolar wouldn't be as severe. But I always thought I knew better, and when I came out of hospital, I went straight back onto the drugs I'd been using. Anyway, I stuck at it, and I got to 3 years clean, and I had a bipolar episode even though I was clean, and unfortunately I picked up. And I suppose this is an indication of how clean time doesn't equal recovery, because I didn't let my sponsor know. Basic step one, honesty, I didn't let him know. And I stuck at it and carried on. And then at 5.5 years, I had another bipolar episode, and I picked up again. And this time, you know, I was so ashamed that I left. I went out for about 4.5 years. Anyway, I kind of, you know, somebody had said to me that, you know, if you go out, you'll be really isolated, you'll be really lonely. I didn't believe that. And then, you know, I was with a kind of group of friends, and was using, and, you know, the bickering and the fighting and the, you know, the infighting that goes with using addicts, it got me down, and I stopped using with them and just kind of carried on using on my own. And lo and behold, I was very isolated and very lonely, and so on and so forth. And being that lonely, it left me open and vulnerable to, you know, people on the internet, women, particularly women on the internet, that used me emotionally and financially. And you know, I was having a really terrible time. And then, you know, I was kind of had a ritual going of going to football, having a kebab, getting a bottle of beer, and just carrying that on. But then, you know, I basically get the taste for it, and, you know, be drinking all night, and, you know, into the next morning. And, you know, it's coming up to Christmas, and I started to lay down drink for Christmas. And I had a row with my sister about the care of my stepmother, who'd had a fall. And I just, you know, I went and bought a bottle of spirit, and I crossed the road. And I guess this is a higher power moment, because I walked into a guy that I knew was in the rooms. And I said to him, "Where's there a meeting tonight?" And we both simultaneously said, "Leytonstone." It was the same meeting that I'd been to 12 years previously. So I took the bottle home, and I got myself to that meeting, and I was back in, and within 11 days, I'd sobered up, cleaned up. I'd taken all the booze I had at home back to the shops where I'd bought it and swapped it for food. And so now I've been continuously clean since the 29th of December 2018. And there's a part in the book under recovery and relapse that I often read to myself. A relapse may be the jarring experience that brings about a more rigorous application of the program. There may be times when a relapse lays the groundwork for complete freedom. And, you know, I like to repeat those to myself. And I've been continuously unwell since August last year with gastric pain. And I've had CT scans, and I'm waiting for colonoscopy. It's suspected stomach cancer. I don't think it is, but it could be. So it's best to get those tests done. But my point is, I guess, that if I go back to the step 2, 3 stuff and turn my will and my life over to the God of my understanding, and read my Just for Today every day, particularly at the moment, because physical pain can be very draining, and I find myself, you know, depressed quite often. But if I read my Just for Today and I pray and I meditate, life, you know, each day is better than it would be if I didn't. That's not to say I didn't achieve stuff when you know, when I was using, you know, me and some of my mates, we did Mad Pride festivals and Bonkers Fest on Camberwell Green. and they were great fun, but they also acknowledged, they also took it out of me, so I did continue to have, bipolar relapses, and ended up anyway. The beauty of recovery for me now is that since that deal I did with my psychiatrist way back in 2008, only one of those episodes have I had to take antipsychotics. So I am about 12 years off antipsychotics. I do still take some medication, a mood stabilizer, but because I've finally, stopped using, I can also stop using the psychiatric medication as well, or some of it, the stuff that was causing me the physical health problems. So, generally life is much better at the moment, and life is good. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Simon. I'm an addict, and it's great to be here. I mean, it's been a strange day. I don't want to see myself. How can I hide myself? There we go. Yeah, I had a really great day yesterday. I went fishing with a friend of mine in recovery. We go fairly regularly, and we both agreed it was probably the best day's fishing we've ever had, right? And we kind of help each other. You can't see this, but I use a wheelchair. I'm paralyzed below the waist. I have no sensation below there. And, there's some things I can do and there's some things I can't do. And I do the driving and he carries the fishing stuff. So it kind of evens out, basically. And, everything was just kind of perfect, really. The weather was right, fishing was good, lots of humorous banter. But it was kind of a bit of a high in recovery, if you know what I mean. And today I've just felt absolutely washed out. And I just really, when I thought, I physically, I have arthritis in my kind of upper body. And I just physically felt unwell today. But actually, I took a meeting earlier today. I do service. And then with that same friend, we went to the park today to feed the squirrels and the pigeons. And I do that because it brings me into the here and now. When I'm involved in nature or doing something that's good for myself, I tend to be focused on that, basically. And then as I've listened to all the shares today, it's actually energized me because I was still feeling quite grotty, actually. And I've been meditating and drinking water, and people have been mentioning a lot of things that I do to take care of myself. I've been doing that. But actually what's really sorted me today is just listening to all the shares that I've heard, basically. And I've had so much identification with so many different things, things that I've experienced and other things that I haven't experienced, just all the kind of suggestions and things that people do. Yeah. And, I rang my sponsor about this share, and part of me thought I couldn't do it because I had a relapse about 21 months ago. And of course, that kind of negative stuff gets in there. Well, the kind of shame kind of can get in there, and then, I haven't got anything to say, which is just completely untrue. I mention that briefly because it does relate to having a disability. I was on a college course I was on one course that I did really well. And I went into another course that I said I wasn't going to do at the beginning. And I found it overwhelming. I was around people drinking a lot more. It wasn't really for me what I was doing. And at the same time, I'd kind of, developed a kind of obsession to use, which I just wasn't talking about. And, it is more difficult, some of the things that I do. It just simply is physically more demanding. And I was surrounded by a bunch of really young people that I couldn't relate to. And I think, I've been going back through the steps with my sponsor, and through the green and gold. And I would say, you know, kind of not being honest with myself and others, and feeling really overwhelmed and not telling people. And if you've got addiction anyway, you know, that's a kind of tricky thing anyway. And then if you've got a kind of physical disability that requires regular management, and if I don't take care of both, I'm in trouble basically. And I didn't use for long, it was for a few days, but it was kind of spaced out over a month, and then I was clean. And by some miracle, you know, the gift of recovery came back to me, and I was just honest basically. And people in NA were really, really loving and caring towards me. And it did feel like, you know, I'd had 7 years, it did feel like a massive disaster, but it wasn't, it just wasn't in the end. And you know, and I just went to meetings, and I mean, one of the really humbling things is I told somebody in my meeting, which I had a commitment, and they had a kind of vote in front of me, and they decided not to vote me out, and I had to carry on doing my service commitment, which was kind of it was humbling. That's all I can say. And I'm really grateful to those addicts that understood me and knew me. They took a risk on me basically. Anyway, I didn't use again after that, and I got a new sponsor, and I got really stuck into doing the step 1 green and gold. And I've been through the steps before, but I hadn't done that one, and it was really, really useful thing to do. And you know, you never know what you're going to get in recovery. So that was a bad, terrible thing. I could have died and all of that. And yet over the last 20 months, I've been through so much stuff. You know, some of it really amazing, some of it really challenging. And, you know, maybe because of what happened, I really have had to dig hard, basically. You know, I kind of stabilized after 6 months, you know, the obsession to use when, and, you know, I got back into NA, and then I've, you know, one of the things about being paralyzed is you can have problems with the kidneys. And a few people, I've heard more about kidneys today than I would hear all day. And, you know, I've only got 1 kidney now, but I've suffered from kidney stones, but I can't feel them because I can't, you know, I'm paralyzed. And so I have to go regularly to hospital. I've spent a lot of time in and out of outpatients and inpatients in the hospitals. And, you know, you know, I never like, I don't like going in hospitals, but I just have to. And I was going to have this big stone removed. And I actually delayed the operation because I did, you know, it was not long after my relapse, and it seemed like the sensible thing to do. In the meantime, and again, I can't feel it, the stone dislodged and somehow jammed this tube. And basically over a period of months between the operation, my kidney just died, but I just didn't know this and I couldn't feel it. And you know, I had some tests done, and anyway, I eventually elected basically to have my kidney removed. You know, it felt really frightening basically, and really upsetting. You know, I was worried about the operation. You know, as I said, I spent a lot of time in hospitals. And I also assumed that I wouldn't feel it, basically, because obviously I'm paralyzed. Well, after I came round in the op, I was actually in a lot of pain. And I was feeling it because they'd gone in above the level of my injury. And, you know, I was in a lot of pain. And I was on fentanyl when I came round, and that's what they were using, and I needed it. You know, I was in a lot of pain, but I had people from NA come to see me, and I had a friend there, and I'd been discussing going in with my sponsor. So I felt, you know, I felt, you know, I was doing everything I can. And after a few days, it was time to leave. And even, you know, I had my friend in NA have to help me to go to the toilet and things like that. You know, for someone who's able-bodied after an operation, you can kind of recover quite quickly. But for me, because I was in a lot of pain and I couldn't really move very easily, it was really difficult. And it was difficult to let my friend see me in such a vulnerable place, really struggling, but I'm so grateful that he was there. And then just before I was about to leave, I took these socks off that they put on me, and I saw two big black kind of shadows on my heels, and I knew immediately that I'd got pressure sores, basically. And if anybody doesn't know what that means, it means that a part of the body has been starved of oxygen, and that flesh is dead and it's going to rot out, basically. And that's what happened. And it was such a horrible feeling, you know, and you know, it was kind of the hospital's fault. They should have been checking for that. I'm someone who's a high risk of getting them. I've had them before. And they kind of apologized that, you know, the mistake had been made, but I was going to have to live with that consequence. So I came back, not knowing how bad they were, because it takes time for the flesh to kind of rot out, on quite strong medication, knowing, you know, I was probably going to have to be on bed rest for a while. And, you know, it was very concerning, but I had somebody from NA visiting me. I had a friend staying with me, and I actually, my friend was staying with me, so he was kind of dishing out this medication, and they give me this big bottle of stuff. I'd actually asked for a non-opiate painkiller. I can't remember the name, which is really works for me, but unfortunately, because I'd only got one kidney, they wouldn't allow me to have it. So it was kind of like, no, you are going to have this. That leaflet, you know, about, you know, illness in recovery and medication, I kind of stuck exactly to that. And but they'd given me way too much, and while my friend was here in control of it, I didn't really think about it. But when I got it, I only knew I only needed to take it for a few hours. And the obvious thing to do was to pour it away, but it took me a day to actually think, oh, I can just throw this away. I don't need, you know. And so that's what I did. I saved a couple of doses. I'm still in some pain, but not as much pain. And, you know, once it had gone, I was so relieved. You know, I was just so glad that it had finished, basically. And, you know, I was still sore. I was still in pain, but I wasn't in that bad pain where it was necessary. And, you know, I stayed in contact with my sponsor and people in NA. And what I found really challenging was that I within a week or so, I knew how bad these pressure sores was, and that I was going to have to go on bed rest for basically months and have the district nurse come in 2 or 3 times a week. In fact, I got more pressure sores for a while. I don't know why that was, but maybe from after having the operation. But it really felt like I was disintegrating, that my body was decaying, and I had some pretty dark thoughts, you know, could I get an infection? Could I get septicemia? Stuff like that. But I didn't. And it actually took 6 months for them to heal. And I don't know, I mean, I haven't really thought about this, but, you know, I suppose I felt very powerless and out of control. That something that I thought was going to be quite short and turned into something quite big. And I just wouldn't have done it, you know, without NA, basically. I just wouldn't have done it without NA and people in NA and people coming to visit me and speaking to, you know, to people on the telephone, basically. And, you know, I did get a bit depressed at one point, but at one point I realized I could start going out a bit. And, you know, I started getting up and going to meetings and things like that. And you know, very slowly it recovered. I think I stopped smoking at some point, and I'm sure that I know that if you smoke and you're healing from something, it will slow the healing down because it reduces the oxygen in your blood. It's as simple as that. Anyway, when I went back for the final checkup with the nurses, I said, well, this took a long time. you know, it took 6 months. She said, oh no, Simon, it usually takes a year to 2 years for what you had to repair. And I can only put that down to being clean, stopping smoking. I'm sure I was on some kind of substitute when I wasn't smoking, and you know, kind of taking care of yourself, taking care of myself, and also taking, you know, by going to meetings and stuff like that, acknowledged I improved my mental health, is what I wanted to say. So that, you know, there's so many things that different things I have to deal with that I can't talk about it. So that is something that I got through that was really difficult. And, you know, I've mentioned that I do service, and being disabled does not stop me from doing service. And I've done a lot of service. But I just wanted, someone reminded me of something when I was visiting a friend in Bath. And he reminded me of when I was trying to get into a venue to talk. And it took like 30 minutes to get into this venue. It was just like the most difficult thing ever. And the poor guy who was helping me kept on apologizing. I'd gone past being angry. I actually felt sorry for him. And my friend said, oh God, that was so bad. That was really awful what happened to you. I remember that. But actually what happened was it triggered me to write a really, really long poem that went into a really great piece of art that I made. And so my memory of that is actually a positive experience, basically. It went from something that was kind of a real drag, basically. I really wanted to go to this event, and you know, and it was like it's a knockout. It was kind of comical, really. But actually, it transformed to something really positive and really creative, and gave me a kind of rich stream of things to draw on and to look at my life in a different way, that some of my own unique experiences have value. Yes, they can be negative and they can drive me mad sometimes, and sometimes the way people interact with me can irritate me. But actually, that kind of my own kind of experience in recovery has a kind of more positive and transformative value, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And that's what happened, you know. And I just got in contact because my friend had only seen the distressing part of it. I hadn't bothered to tell him about everything that had happened, you know. And my memory of that now is completely different. Yeah. And, you know, just recently a few people have mentioned, you know, taking care of yourself. I've started meditating and doing a kind of different meditation. You know, sometimes doing the same thing gets a bit stale. And so I started doing some guided meditation and things like adaptive yoga. You know, just because I can't do it like other people, there are other solutions to do it in a different way. And, you know, the last 20 months, you know, I've really lent into having a higher power and a God of my understanding, you know, whether it's feeding the pigeons in the park, or asking people for help, or just sitting in silence until my head shuts up. Those kind of healing things have really, really got me through, basically. And, you know, asking for help. You know, I can't do it on my own. It's as simple as that. I just can't do it on my own. And maybe it's also briefly given me a new perspective. My mother's been really ill. Getting a bit emotional now the last few years. She's had cancer, she's an alcoholic, she's had a series of problems, and I've really, really been able to be there consistently for her. And I tell her that I love her, and I don't see those old resentments anymore. I just see this vulnerable woman who's really frightened and really struggling, and me and my sister share that responsibility, you know. I encourage her to take care of herself. And one of the things I found myself doing, I started cooking like healthy vegetable meals, and I took them up to her because I was worried that she wasn't eating properly. I'm sure she's not eating vegetables, and she's living on chalk ices, basically, which, you know, and I can look after my own health, and I can also worry about other people's health as well, and, you know, kind of carry what I've learned about myself to other people, in this case, my mum, basically. And yeah, and obviously she's really struggled with COVID. You know, I've been really involved in service, whether it's been meetings or online conventions, and so I've kind of, the things that I've learned in NA and stuff around my disability have really helped me in this difficult time. You know, I've had some, it's been difficult, but some of it's been really good for me on some level. But for my mother, who's had to shield and, you know, has got various kind of problems, it's been really difficult for her. And it's kind of been a kind of honour and a privilege to just be really try and be of service to someone and just completely put my own stuff to one side, you know. And you know, she's a very challenging person, you know, she, you know, I have to say that. But yeah, I don't know, I wanted to talk about loads and loads of different things, but I think my time's out, you know. I'm really grateful that I was asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, my name's Vicky. I'm an addict. And what a privilege and a pleasure to be able to share tonight and speak to everybody about illness in recovery and my sort of journey with it, and how recovery has really helped me, and how the literature's helped me, and how everybody in the rooms has helped me. You know, I came into recovery as a 42-year-old woman. My kids were in care and I was very damaged. And the illnesses I had at that time were fairly obvious. Most of them were to my emotional self, my self-esteem, all that kind of a thing. Physically, I thought I was okay. And through working the program, through getting a sponsor, going through the steps, doing service, all the things that are suggested, I managed to start to build a life. My children came back to me quite quickly. I got them into schools and I started to do some voluntary work, which then turned into work. And everything seemed to be going along quite well. And I was about, I suppose, 8 or 9, maybe 8 years clean, when I started to feel quite unwell. And this went on for a period of time until I got so unwell that I had to leave my job. And it was a really big blow for me, because all the time I was doing my job, I was moaning about it and taking it for granted. And then when I had to leave, I realized that quite a lot of my identity was wrapped up in what I did, who I could be for other people, you know, how basically people saw me. It was nothing to do with who I am as a person without any of the other stuff. So it took me into a very different area of myself, my program, my life. And I see it as a bit of a gift now, because although I had to leave work, and that was a really huge thing for me, I have managed to get back into work, just to say. It gave me time to spend with my children. And you know, this whole thing about learning to sit with yourself, I thought I was doing all right, but I realized I had not even touched the surface, because sitting with myself for me meant sitting with the TV on, the radio on in the background, probably doing a crossword whilst playing Candy Crush on my phone. You know, I couldn't literally just sit with myself, but there was times when I was ill where I wasn't capable of doing anything bar sitting with myself. So at first it hit me really hard, and I've heard somebody else say this evening that they were diagnosed with lupus, and that's what they came to the conclusion that I had. I mean, I have got some other things along with that, but the lupus was the thing that sort of really struck me. And because I was so unwell and so exhausted and had this brain fog, I couldn't get to meetings. I was feeling very sorry for myself. And I sat down one day and had a little quiet time in the morning where I did my readings and everything else. And this thought struck me that actually I kind of regressed to this place where when I came into the rooms, I didn't have any idea who I was. My identity was completely obliterated. Who was I? What did I like? You know, when people said to me, what music do you like? It's like, well, I like whatever you like. I was this chameleon. And, you know, I'd also come in as a victim. And it wasn't because I was inventing things. Big shit had happened to me a lot of the time. And I had that as part of, you know, without all of that stuff to present to you, oh my goodness, this has happened, that's happened, without living in that chaos, my life was really flat. And that was where I was at when I came through the doors of Narcotics Anonymous. Suddenly, sort of 8 years on, I'm clean but ill, and I'm sort of sitting in the same place. It's like, oh no, I've got no identity, who am I? And I felt like a victim. Like my life's at an end, you know. It's really dramatic because I was 42 when I came into recovery, so I'm now approaching 50, and it's like my life's over at 50. What am I going to do? Mentally and emotionally, I was probably still in my 20s, you know. But So yeah, it was all a bit of a felt like a bit of a disaster, and I wasn't sure where to go with it. But when I had this sort of spiritual awakening on this particular morning, where I realized that I was sinking backwards, I hadn't picked up drugs and alcohol, but I picked up the attitudes and emotions that I'd come in through the doors with. And I knew that this program works. This program had changed my life. It had changed me. It changed everything about me. And so surely that still had to be the case, because it wasn't dependent on whether I was physically able. So I read through some of the literature and I started to contact people, because I, you know, unlike most of you, I'm sure, I don't really like asking for help. And I think one of the things that didn't assist me in that was, as a child in my family, we weren't really allowed to be ill. I can remember when I was about 14, I had glandular fever, and the doctor had said to my mum, right, you need to keep Vicky home for about 6 weeks. You mustn't go back to school. And by week 2, my mum was saying to me, look, you go back to school. If you're really ill, they'll send you home. You know, we just didn't do illness in our family. So for me, being ill meant I felt guilty, I felt ashamed, and I certainly wasn't going to ask other people for any kind of help. And I knew that that was something else that had to change. So, you know, again, a bit of the gifts of becoming ill. So I looked to one of the newest bits of our literature, the Living Clean book, where it talks about the journey continuing. There's a little section in there. It's on page 105, and it says this. It says, surrender in times of illness can mean a lot of different things. We surrender to the process. We surrender to the fact of mortality and to the possibility of survival. Surrender in this sense does not mean giving up. One member in the midst of a long illness said, it was pretty easy for me to surrender to the possibility of dying. It was a different kind of surrender for me to become willing to fight for my life. And I read that and I thought, you know, that is what I've got to do. I've got to fight for my life. And with a lot of other problems that I've had in my life, it comes down to, a lot of the time, my attitude. You know, and I had to kind of switch around that attitude of being a victim into the attitude of gratitude, in a literal sense. One of the things that I realized about myself was that as a using addict, I've been quite happy to go out, beg, borrow, steal a tenner, to go to some complete stranger on a street corner that I didn't know anything about and give them my last tenner and trust that what they gave me was going to give me what I wanted. But you take me to a doctor who studied for 7 years to give me an opinion, and they genuinely want to help me and they're not interested in my money, and I'm very, very suspicious. Who is this person telling me this is what's wrong? You know, and I could see the insanity of that. It's like this step 1, 2, and 3. I'm powerless over this illness. I'm not powerless over how I choose to feel about it and how I choose to allow it to affect me. There's an insanity in the way that I think, but once I recognize that, then I can hand it over, I can surrender it, and I can say, well, this is bloody stupid. So I made a decision that I needed to trust the doctors and the medical profession. And as somebody else has mentioned, you know, there's lots of opinions given in the rooms about all sorts of things, but most especially around medication. It can be very confusing and very frightening. So I thought my recovery has to come first, as it has done in every other area of my life. If I don't put my recovery first, that area of my life will very soon disappear. First thing I did when I went to any of the doctors or hospital appointments was confess. It was almost like I sat down and went, my name's Vicky, I'm an addict. You know, I had to tell them straight away, please do not give me the option to have medication that I don't need that is mood altering, because I really need to try my best to cope without it. And what I sort of told myself was, look, I can go in there and I can justify having opiates because I'm in a lot of pain. But supposing I do that now, and in 5 years my pain's got worse, what have I got left to attack it with? You know, I don't want to use everything in the armory right now. I want to try and use as little as possible. So I went in there with this determination, and even now, so this was 8 years ago, I'm still only taking paracetamol, and I take meloxicam, which is an anti-inflammatory. And then I use essential oils and various other things like that. And I don't have any opinion about anybody else using tramadol or any other kind of pain relief. That's entirely up to them. But I know for me, I really have to be very careful and very strict with myself. And because I had taken away from me the ability to work at that point in time, if I was in a lot of pain, I could take a medication, or I could just take some time out. You know, I didn't need to be doing something. If I couldn't sleep, it was okay. I could have a nap in the afternoon. So I just started to surrender to what my body wanted to do when it wanted to do it. And a bit like, I mean, obviously the men on here haven't given birth, and I'm sure some of the women have. When I was in labour, all the time they're saying to me, don't push, don't push, don't push. It was bloody agony. But the minute they said to me, yeah, you can push now, it was like my body wasn't fighting itself anymore. And it became an amazing experience, which then ended with this baby, you know. And it was a bit the same with the pain. It's like all the time I was trying to fight it. It just was horrendous, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally as well. But as I surrendered to it, it was a more bearable thing. I became to understand it, and I realized that a lot of it was fear. So I have a fear-based disease, and it will come out in any area of my life that I allow it free reign. One funny story about confessing I was an addict all the time. I went to the hospital to see this consultant, and for some reason he shone a torch up my nose, and he went, oh, you've got this massive hole in your septum, Vicky. How did you get that? I thought it was a trick question. I mean, the only people I know who've got holes in their septum, it comes from copious amounts of drugs. So I said to him, well, I think it's probably snorting copious amounts of cocaine. And he said, oh, really? And I said, well, yeah, what other reasons would there be? And he said, oh, there's quite a few, actually. So I didn't need to tell him that. He was the one person, because he wasn't going to prescribe me anything. I didn't need to tell him. So that really made me laugh. And I thought, right, I'll do a little bit more research next time. But yeah, so you know, I kind of got to this point of thinking, who am I without work? Who am I without the ability to rush around and do stuff for everybody and be everybody's everything? Who am I? And I realized that the work that I'd done up to that point had helped me in a lot of ways and taught me a lot of things. But the one thing I still didn't do was love myself, you know, and I knew when I came into the rooms, that was something was expressed in lots of different ways by lots of different people. But it's like the more I learn to love myself, the more ability I have to give as well as receive love. And so it became a time that I could then spend doing other things. So instead of rushing around like a maniac, I spent more time meditating. I spent more time praying. I've done some of these women's retreats where we go through, you know, you look at the deep trauma from your childhood. But I tell you what, it's been amazing. It's really been freeing. And I'm not going to say that having this emotional healing has taken away all my physical pain. But what it has done is given me a complete inner peace. I'm really happy with who I am now. And I'm really happy with the fact it doesn't matter whether I can rush around and be everything to everybody or not. It just matters that, you know, if somebody wants to ring me up and ask me for a bit of advice about something that I've gone through, that's just as valuable as being able to go around and do their cleaning for them, for example. You know, it's just looking at different things. And in the same book, the Living Clean book, page 108, there's a little verse. It says this: disability doesn't disqualify us from service. On the contrary, may make us more aware of the needs of our members and the obstacles to recovery for addicts still suffering. There are ways for everyone to give back in NA, even if we have to be a little creative about how we can best serve. We can be powerful examples of commitment and willingness when we look past our own obstacles to help others. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? Even just turning up at the meeting and saying, I'm Vicky, I'm an addict, look, I'm not feeling that well, but I'm here today, surely that's going to give some encouragement to someone. And slowly but surely, what I did was I went back through commitments that I hadn't done for quite a long time. So I went back and I became a greeter again. And I took my own chair and I sat by the door and I stood up and hugged people as they came in and welcomed them to the meeting. And I absolutely loved it. And I felt like I had a little bit of purpose, you know, because there's nothing like doing some service to feel a part of. I also got a little bit more education around my illness, because my denial has always been, all my life, if I pretend something's not happening, then I can ignore it. So when I was pregnant, for example, I did not want to go to antenatal classes. I did not want to be told what was going to happen and how to best deal with it. I'll just let it happen and I'll deal with it then. I found that wasn't the best approach with autoimmune disease. So I got a little bit of education and I learned some things that would help me, and that helped me to get a little bit stronger. And then I discovered this heat massage bed. It was quite expensive, but it gave me quite a lot of relief. And I was able then to go back and say, right, I want to do the T now. And I've gone back through all the different commitments in the meeting and been part of the meetings again in the same way as I was in the beginning. And I've actually gone back to area and I've done chair of H&I and I've done all these things since I've been unwell, because lucky me, I left work. You know, we live in a country, I am so grateful. We live in a country where they pay me to stay home. I've got a nice car sitting outside that I'd never been able to have when I was working. You know, I've got this attitude of gratitude now. I just look at all the benefits. If I lived somewhere else in the world, who knows what would have happened to me? You know, but I've had all the help that I need. I've had all the things that I need given to me, and it's given me time. I've got sponsees that I wouldn't have been able to have. And I've done a lot of stuff for myself that I would never have been able to do before. So I've really come to a point where I can sit here and say, I'm actually pretty grateful. I went to the hospital yesterday and I've got another illness, which diverticular disease, and I've got to have part of my bowel removed. I won't go into huge detail because it's not terribly attractive thought of what they're going to do. But anyway, part of that, he was sort of saying, well, you know, you might have to have a few weeks off and this and that there. And I said, do you know what? It's brilliant. When we had COVID, I was shielding. And I'm sure some people on here were also shielding. And I had a succession of people ringing me up and saying, are you okay? It must be awful. It must be so boring. I said, no, this is nothing like a rock bottom. Before I came into recovery, I had a rock bottom. I was sitting in a room completely surrounded by shit of my own making with nothing to my name, not completely psychotic and paranoid and filthy. You know, now I'm sitting in this nice house. I've got a garden outside. I've got people delivering me food. I've got people phoning me up to see if I'm okay all the time. And NA've gone on to Zoom. I've got meetings. I did 90 and 90, you know, which is something I hadn't done since my early recovery, noted. And again, you know, so reconnected really well into NA, went back to a place that I hadn't been able to do for a number of years. And for me, there was a lot of benefits that came out of being stuck inside for 14 weeks. And I think I wouldn't have felt that if I hadn't have had this illness, if I hadn't have learned those lessons. So one of the better things about being ill is that I can sit here and genuinely say, I have got value. I am enough, whether I do anything or not, whether I can go anywhere or not. I've got 4 amazing adult children who have been so supportive and loving and caring, and they've all got on with their lives. None of them have gone the way that I chose. And I've got a grandson that's only ever known me clean. And that was why earlier I wasn't physically on the meeting. I was here, but I had to go and collect my grandson and bring him back. And I was just sitting having a chat with him. You know, what a gift. What an amazing gift. So does my illness define me? No, I could have let it. I could have chosen to go back into that victim mode and back into that mode. Oh, no, you know. And I really do not blame anybody that does that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad if they're in that place of feeling really, really awful, because it is hard. But for me, the message would be that with this fellowship, with this program, with the God of our understanding, we literally can conquer anything. Because the place that a lot of people have come from, the place that I've come from, I wanted to die. There was nothing of me left. I wanted to die. And this program has given me back my life, and it's given me back my spirit. And I now have a power in me, which is greater than the power outside of me, which could seek to destroy me. I ain't gonna, you know, there's nothing out there that I can't tackle with the program, with my sponsor, with you guys, with all the stuff that NA has given me. There's nothing that I can't tackle. And I had to look death in the face. It's not the first time. I had cancer when I was in my 30s and pregnant with my 4th child, and it was very, very aggressive. And I looked death in the face then, and I thought, do you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm powerless over whether I live or die. Obviously, I'm not going to walk in front of traffic because that would be a bit stupid. But I'm fairly powerless over whether I live or die. But I'm not powerless over whether I choose to worry about whether I'm going to die and therefore ruin the time that I've got left, if you see what I mean. It's like, if I can't change it, I might as well get on with it. So live the serenity prayer, I said to myself. Have the wisdom to know the difference, change stuff that I can. If I can't change it, just allow it, just get on with it. And it served me well. So my message is keep coming back, whether you're early days or you've been around for years and years and years, there's still stuff this program that can give me, and that we can give it. Yeah, happy customer. I'll leave it there.